Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to this morning's EdConnect Early Career Unconference. My name is Ben, I'm one of the network committee members and the founder of EdConnect. I'm just going to give a little introduction to who we are and what we're about before we start this morning. So I'm just going to share my screen and go through a very brief PowerPoint. So hopefully you can all see that. Excuse me. So feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We know we've got you watching, and obviously if you're watching this back, then thank you for taking the time to watch it. So EdConnect is a grassroots network for early career professionals in education across the globe. So we have a global span, it's not just England. It covers trainee teachers, people aspiring to teach, early career teachers, all those people that make up that early part of education. And all of our work, we believe that every early career educator should be able to thrive and not just survive. It's really important that you can be incredibly successful in the early part of your teaching career. So EdConnect is actually quite an old, well, I say old organisation, nearly 3 years old organisation. And we started in lockdown when it was a very tough time for trainee teachers. It was, and early career teachers. There was lots of uncertainty. There was lots of new things being implemented, like the early career framework and things over the next couple of years. And it was really important that people could, excuse me, people had the opportunity to network, collaborate and support one another. So it started off just as an Instagram chat group and then turned into a series of chat groups. And then we held several events over the course of the next year. What you can do is if you go onto the rest of this YouTube channel, which you're watching from, you are able to see the playbacks from those other events as well. Those events covered job interviews and applications, which was a really, really popular one. As our first event, we looked at well-being and workload. We looked at trainee teachers, what I wish I'd known. We had the fantastic Sarah Mullin as the keynote speaker. She was really, really good. And that event was very well attended. And we also had a panel discussion on the early career framework. And then we had our relaunch event in October 2021. But we sort of been very dormant and stagnant from then. And we really want to, with the new network of volunteers that we've got, the committee we've got, we really want to showcase what we can do and work together by making it really simple and really straightforward, but also having some really good speakers and really good events as well. So today is all about starting that. So we're covering a range of topics today, which I'll introduce to you later. But there's a numbers of ways you can get involved in our network. So you can get involved in our e-newsletter. So sign up for our e-newsletter. You'll see that on our link, our Twitter, the link's on there. You can volunteer as part of our network committee. This is really important. So we've only been able to achieve what we can achieve in EdConnect through the usage of volunteers. Really, and we've had a great number of volunteers, but we need more to really help. We only have limited capacity. We're all working or studying full time, so we do need people to help. You can also write blogs for our website. It can be anything education-based, which we will be happy to publish. You can follow us on social media, share your successes, share the things you're struggling with, discuss on Twitter, on Instagram, and get involved with our Wellbeing Wednesday, which takes place every week. But do keep an eye on spam and junk folders because often emails can go into there, especially emails from our accounts, particularly the e-newsletter. So and the Eventbrite. So do check that so you don't get disappointed. So we're very lucky that we have a great range of topics being covered today. So we're going to start with a panel talking all about networking. We've got a section on inclusion in the classroom, what we'd wish we'd known at the beginning of our career, teaching overseas. So if you're ever thinking about moving abroad to teach, we've got a fantastic speaker for that. We'll be looking at unions, linking to networking, and also the very important topic, which is something our network really focuses on, which is mental health, workload, and well-being. So we are going to get started very, very shortly with our networking panel discussion. I'm just going to stop sharing the PowerPoint for now. But I would like to introduce, if she's there, Naya, who's one of our other senior committee members who has worked very hard behind the scenes to organise this event and has done the majority of the organisation. I can't take the credit for this. So if you're able to now, I'll add you into the studio. I know you're not feeling too well today, but if you're able to talk, then please do introduce yourself. Naya has been the person who's been liaising with all the speakers and doing all of the promotions on the social media front for today. So I can't take credit for it. I have to give that credit to Naya. So I'm going to add her in. Naya, if you are able to and okay to speak, please do say good morning.
No, good morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. I'm not showing my face because I look awful. Might do later on. So yeah, welcome to EdConnect, our first event of 2023. I'm very excited to, introduce to, you guys speakers, and Ben can take credit for some of it. We both worked together in creating this event today. Obviously, at the end of it, we welcome any sort of feedback from both speakers and yourself for those attending, so we can take that on board to improve for future events. Okay, I think one of the things I really, really want to say is please be tweeting and Instagramming, hashtag EdConnect. We want to see hashtag EdConnect trending on Twitter today. So please make sure that you do that. We will be retweeting them. And I think I keep forgetting, sorry, my brain's all. We are giving that book away for those that are attending from Mr. NQT's and Andrew Taylor. So that's also that for those that are attending today. We just thought it's a nice idea for those that are, attending. It's a nice little gift, and it's something that I hope to do the future for future events as well. Something similar. I haven't really properly introduced myself. I'm Nia. I do work full time as well as a teacher, very full on. And I'm also co-chair with Ben for EdConnect. I think my journey started EdConnect a few years ago, right, Ben? A few years ago, and then I ended up from a volunteer, from speaking for the first time ever to event, to network leader, to head of wellbeing, to chair. It's been a journey, and that's just me.
Thanks, Naya. It made me realise that I didn't introduce myself either, apart from saying that I'm the founder of EdConnect. But I'm also a teacher, so I'm in my second year, but I was an unqualified teacher the year before starting my ECT journey. So I'm an ECT +2 and also a middle leader as well in the school. And I'm going to be speaking a bit later on about what I wish I'd known at the beginning of my career, because there's lots of things that don't know that you find out when you become a teacher all of a sudden. So thank you, Naya, and once again, thank you for helping organise this event. So we are going to get started very shortly with our networking panel discussion. So we're going to talk about the importance of networking within your early career, and this is going to form quite a big part of the first part of the event. So we're going to have a 45-minute discussion all about networking, and then we'll probably have a little break before the first speaker about 11:20. So we have got, just before we start, we should have Amjad Ali joining us. If you don't know who he is, he's a fantastic speaker and trainer, but he did message me this morning to say that his son unfortunately had been very unwell in the night, so he might join us. We also have Kemi joining us, who's an assistant head teacher and the founder of the Young Black Teacher Network, and is very also a Senko and does lots of other things in education, and she's going to be joining our panel discussion very shortly. And then we also have Ella, who's from the Young Women in Education Network as well. But what I'll do is, without I can't do them justice myself, I will let them to introduce themselves. I'm going to add Kemi and Ella into the studio now, into the stream. So good morning, Kemi, and good morning, Ella.
Morning.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining us and giving up some of your Saturday to be part of this discussion. Hopefully Amjad can join us later. But I'm just going to ask you first, just to introduce yourselves. I gave you a very, very brief introduction, but I thought I'd let you do it yourself instead. So Kemi, if I could come to you first and then back to you, Ella, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kemi, and I'm the founder of the Young Black Teachers Network, which was founded in 2018. I'm also an assistant head teacher and a Senko. I've been a guest lecturer at the University of East London. I'm an ed consultant as well, and a science teacher. And I trained back in 2014. So it's coming up to 10 years, almost 10 years that I've been teaching now. So yeah, that's just a bit about me.
Hello, I'm Ella, and I'm a lot early on in my career in comparison to Kemi. So I'm an ECT too, so the same as you, Ben. And I started Young Women Education when I was in my first year of teaching because I was really struggling a lot. And some of the issues that I was coming across, people in the senior leadership team didn't know how to deal with them. So when I looked for like a fellow women's network for just young women who have just started out, I couldn't find one. So I thought I'll just take it upon myself and then just start my own network because there was clearly something that was missing and that really needed to be there.
That's great, Ella, thank you. And I think that's really interesting that you've said that, because we've sort of launched our network because we felt that there was a need for it. And I think you find that with lots of networks out there. I'm sure we'll come on to that a bit later on, about that there's been a real shift over the last couple of years, networks to meet the needs of people in education where they've not necessarily been met by the actual sector in sort of the day job. So that's really interesting. We'll probably unpick that a bit later. But before we get onto the topic of networking, I thought it'd be really interesting. I know, Ella, you said you're sort of in the same position as me in terms of your career. Kemi, you're a bit more experienced, but can you reflect on your early careers and what sort of you wish you'd known? What were the key learnings for you? Because that's going to be a big theme today. Ella, I'll come to you first, and then I'll come to you.
So I think, sorry, the internet cut out a little bit there. So I think what I was doing when I started in my first year of teaching is that everyone was sort of in the same boat, because I feel like the emotions you feel and sometimes the things that you experience, especially in your first year, you take everything very personally, and sometimes it feels quite a lonely career because people just don't understand why you're tired all the time. But then actually when you speak to other people, everyone else is in the exact same boat, and actually you can all help each other, if that makes sense, because what you might have experienced, someone else in a different school might have also experienced that. So actually, if you speak to each other, then that way, like, you can help each other overcome your problems. So it's not as lonely as you think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, people need to be in the same boat. And I suppose if you've not got friends or family or people close to you who are also in education, they don't always necessarily get it. So that's really important. Kemi, how about you in your early career then?
Honestly, I really wish I knew the power of networking. Sorry. I really wish I knew the power of networking when I first started my career. I think that would have helped me move along a lot further, a lot quicker. So for example, you're saying you're a middle leader and you're in your second year of being a teacher. It took me like more than double that time to become a middle leader. I didn't become a middle leader until 2019. So I wish I knew the power of networking, because I realized where it got some people. And I also wish I knew the power of negotiating your salary. I feel a lot of people that I've seen, they feel they have to go from M1 to M2 to M3. They have to follow that route. However, it doesn't have to be like that. And I think it wasn't until about maybe 3 or 4 years in, and that's when I realized every single time I'm going for a new job, I will negotiate because I know my worth. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think we, as teachers, we're all hardworking. We all want the very best, whether you're just a teacher or whether you're doing other things as well within a school. And often it can sometimes be that you're sort of expected to take those roles on just because, you're in your second year of teaching now, so you're going to be responsible for this and you're going to lead this with no extra money, no extra time. You're just going to do that jump, like you said, from M1 to M2. And it's really important, like you said, to know your worth, because everyone brings obviously complementary skills to, you know, a school. We all have very different strengths, very different areas for development, I'm sure. But yeah, like you said, that knowing your worth is incredibly important. That yes, you may, especially when you're early in your career, you may be a new teacher, but you have got a lot to give, just as more experienced people have as well. So thank you for that, both. That's really interesting. So this idea of networking then, like Kemi, you said you really wish you understood the power of it at the beginning of your career, which is why we wanted to do this panel as well. If for anyone who's watching, if you watch our October 2021 event, we did do another panel discussion on the importance of networking and how to navigate and curate a network. In terms of your experience of networking, Kemi, how have you found it? Have you found it quite easy? Have you found it quite hard? How have you sort of, in terms of, I don't necessarily mean setting up the Young Black Teacher Network, because we'll talk about that later, but in terms of you and your networking with others, how have you found it? What were some of the challenges? What were some of the triumphs? Just to sort of share so that other people who are starting out know some of the things that might come up and how to potentially combat them.
So for me, earlier on in my career, networking was not in my vocabulary. That would just not happen. I was very scared to network. I don't know, I just found it it just caused me a lot of anxiety, having to maybe go up to someone and just start, especially someone I didn't know, and just start talking to them about, I don't know, God knows what to do with education. So I didn't feel comfortable doing it. But I realized how as teachers, as educators, we always give the best of ourselves to our students. And we always, we talk to them confidently. We go into our lessons and we've planned everything and we're just good to go. But then I thought to myself, how am I feeding into my own career development and making sure that I'm doing the right things for my career to move forward? And what made it even more anxious for me is that I never used to see people who looked like me in the room. So I think for some reason, I felt like maybe I couldn't connect with them. So it was just, of course, that wasn't the case. There were people I could definitely connect with and speak with, but then that was just my own maybe shyness or anxiety. But I did also have to ask myself, how come there aren't people who look like me in this room? What is the issue here? This is not the 1950s, it's 2013 or 2014. And it just really made me feel like I need to network more and I want to get those diverse faces, into the room and see, hear their opinion. Because whenever I would go to, whether it's CPD or events, it was always the same faces. So I thought, I'm sure there are more of us out there, what's going on there. But networking was, it's something that, like I said, I wish I knew, because it's the people who you meet can definitely elevate your career. They can teach you things that you would have never known before. They can connect you with someone else that can help you to get to where you want to go. Networking has definitely opened doors for me, and it has allowed me to become more confident in who I am as a teacher, in how I teach, and also on the business side of things when it comes to the Young Black Teachers Network. And I wish everyone from the get-go knew that. I think they need to have more networking events for early career teachers who are training. Those events where you're not just, social media is a powerful tool, right? I've met Ben through social media, and now I've met Ella through social media and through this platform. But it's just, prior to COVID, Zoom meetings or StreamYard wasn't used as much, right? So I'm just thinking back then, there should have been a lot more things that were done in education to ensure people are able to network, because the time of the day is, we don't always have a lot of time in the school day to network with others, or even after school because we're marking or something like that.
Yeah, I think you've picked out some really useful points and threads there. And I think when we talked about networking at our previous event, we had Hannah Wilson, who is a really keen networker. She's someone I really admire. And she said, I remember, not at that event, but I remember her saying, and I did say this to her at the event, she said, I think, she said, all trainee teachers should have a session on networking within their teacher training, regardless of what route. How do you navigate a network? How do you use it to your advantage? How do you give to other people? How do you curate that diverse network in terms of making sure you've got, like you said, Kemi, didn't see people like you in that room. How, you know, you didn't have that sense of belonging in some of those that networking, and that's really important. And also that, yeah, how do you curate that not diverse network in terms of protected characteristics and inclusion, but also in diverse of thought and getting all those different things out of people that you can share. So I think that's really interesting that that's shared. So thank you for that. Ella, obviously you started a network as well, and you wanted to really keenly network at your career. It's about how you set up your network, but similar to Kemi, what are some of the things you faced, barriers? What sort of things would you want to share with others who are trying to also navigate creating a network?
I think the first thing is just knowing where to start when creating a network. So luckily I did Teach First, so that meant that Teach First have Teach First networks, and that's initially where I got the idea from, because I was like, okay, I want to join a women's network. I'll look at Teach First because I know they had lots of different networks that represent lots of different people. So I was like, I'll look on the Teach First website and see what networks they have, and that's when I came across the fact they didn't have one for women. And I know within Teach First, within the staff, they have a women's network within the staff, but not necessarily within for the Teach Firsters who are obviously on the courses. So then there was a button up Teach First where it's like, if you're interested in creating your network, please email and we can have a discussion. And then that's where then Teach First put me forward with Tim Mobbs, who at the time was the person who represented and who helped set up and start networks with Teach First. So I think because I already had Teach First as a network in the first place, that allowed me to then set up and navigate a new network, if that makes sense.
That's great, thank you. And obviously, yeah, like Teach First, we weren't a Teach First network, we were a network established, but we've joined the sort of Teach First network family. And if you are out there and watching this, do go and check their network section of their website, because they do have a great range of different networks that you can explore in terms of different areas of teaching, different subjects, phases, and also different areas including diversity, equity, inclusion, school leadership, business, and so many things. So in terms of, we sort of touched on this, and one thing I was trying to remember, I wanted to say something when I was sort of rounding up what Kemi had last said, and it just went out of my head, but it's come back into my head now, that we talked about, you talked about, Kemi, the importance of there being more events for early career teachers. And if we think, if you look, say, on social media, for example, in other sectors, particularly not necessarily the public sector, but the private sector, many people, you see people going to networking events every week, in-person networking events every week. It's built in as part of your day. Often, you know, some organisations, I mean, my dad runs, he works in logistics, but he set up a network for young people within his industry, but the way he's sort of brought in is he went and worked with the employers first, and sort of and worked about giving people time back to attend these events. Whereas in teaching, it's always you work really long days and then you come to like this Saturday networking event. What sort of things do you think are the issues within networking within education? Are there solutions to it? How could we potentially do it? So this is just more of like a discussion of thought, really. Kemi, what sort of things do you think we should probably be adopting in the education sector to improve networking and sort of elevate its place for people in their early career, but all through their career as well?
So one thing that people like to say about teachers is that, but we get the school holidays, right? But what they don't understand is that the same amount of work that they're doing, or maybe even more, we have condensed it into 39 school weeks. So it's very, very intense and tiring. It can be very frustrating sometimes, although it is a rewarding role. We don't have enough time in a day to do our job, because we're not just working from, I don't know, 8:15 when school starts till 3:15. Most teachers are there. I know teachers who get to work from 6:45. And there are times where I don't leave until 8, 9 p.m. at night. There have been times where that has happened. There's no time within a day to network. So I feel where some companies in the private sector might give their staff, you know, volunteer days where they can take a few days within a year to go out and do some volunteering. Maybe they can give us some days within a year to go out and network, to go to different events where we are, like events that we feel would really benefit us we can find them ourselves, or they, schools can share them in staff bulletins and so on. I also feel not all CPD is relevant. There are, some that might be quite controversial because it's all about, continuous professional development, but not all CPD that you attend you might feel it applies to you. If you don't want to become a pastoral leader, that CPD doesn't apply to you. So why do you want to go? You might go into teaching and learning or curriculum or data. I feel if that time could be used, okay, if you're not going to come to this CPD, why don't you go to an event for your own professional development instead? So if that means you have to leave work by 3:30 to get there and attend that professional event, it's better off for you. It's better for your career development. So I think those are two things that schools can do. Give us the certain days that we can use. I know some schools are adopting like well-being days, for example, right? So maybe if they adopt certain days within an academic year, maybe 1 day a term, or if it's too much, maybe 2 days per academic year, to go out to a networking event that we feel will be beneficial for us in our personal careers and the development that we want to see. And also, if the CPD that the school is offering is not relevant to you and that's not something you want to do or see yourself going down that avenue, find something that will benefit you. Put that, I don't know, leave of absence, and then said, during that time that the CPD or twilight session is going on in school, I'll be going to this event, and I can feedback and say the benefits of that event. And, you can even share with your team or your colleagues to help them upskill as well. I think those are two things that schools can adopt.
That's great. Thank you so much. Ella, what do you think?
I also agree. Like, I think having like that hour, or just having an hour every couple of weeks just to actually know where to begin, because often, especially as an ECT2, they're asking me like, where do you want to develop? Where do you see yourself going? And I'm like, well, I haven't actually had time to think about what direction I want to go in, because all my time is spent on all these other stuff that take priority over which direction I want to go in, because I would love to just have an hour a day or like an hour a week just to scroll through Twitter, look for networks or look for people and read about people's different stories and look at lots of different like research papers. But I just don't have the time. And I think that's, like Kemi says, is the issue, that schools sometimes don't prioritize networking or see networking, as you were saying, Ben, as other sectors do. And I also think a big issue at the moment is, because there is quite a lot of shortage of staff, is that obviously school aren't prioritizing people taking time off for courses, because obviously if there's not enough staff in the school, they might have to cancel your courses. And I know that's like a national issue with a shortage of staff, but I think that can also stop people from networking, because they might think, oh, well, if I do this course, school might not have cover for my lessons. So it might actually then stop people doing it, because they might think, if I take the day off to go to this networking event, then who's going to cover my 6-period day? So I think sometimes as teachers, we also prevent ourselves from networking, because we sometimes think about the impact that could have on our pupils or on the school by just taking like a day off.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point. And I suppose some more forward-thinking schools, trusts, organisations probably are integrating that and seeing this networking as part of CPD rather than a bolt-on to, like, you've got your day job, you've got your CPD within that as well, and then you've got networking if you want to do it, if you want to go to an event on a Saturday, if you want to engage on social media, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's about seeing, like you say, using things like wellbeing days, personal development days, whatever you call them, to recognise that, I agree, Kemi, but yeah, not all CPD is relevant. It's not relevant for unless your interests, or if it's an area of strength that you want to, that you're being made to sit through that CPD, but you could be using it a bit more wisely. So that's a really interesting discussion there, and thinking about other sectors as well. So thank you. One thing I wanted to ask now is, obviously you've both set up and established networks, and you've sort of spoke a little bit briefly about your rationale for doing that. But talk to us a little bit more about, one, explain that rationale a bit further. Two, tell us how you went about setting up that network and sort of what you've achieved. It's quite a long question, I do apologise. What you've achieved from it, but also where you want to go next with your network. So I'll start with you, Ella, and then we'll come to you, Kemi, if that's okay.
Yeah, so my network came about because, like I said, I was doing Teach First. We didn't have a summer institute, which is where you normally meet in person. And what I was finding is there wasn't, because of COVID and everything, because I trained in 2020/2021, which was obviously a very disruptive year. It meant that it was really hard to meet people. So I lived with 2 teachers, which was great, but it also meant that they were like the only teachers that I knew. And when we did have Teach First days, there was only a brief amount of time in the Zoom calls to actually chat and catch up and speak to other teachers. So I was firstly feeling quite lonely because of how I train, when I train. It just meant that there was really limited options to meet teachers, when before me there was lots of opportunities to meet people through the route that I did with Teach First. And also I was experiencing quite a lot of things in school, such as children were making like inappropriate comments, or there were sometimes just some things that I felt that when I went to someone at school, they didn't have the answers for. And when I spoke to somebody else who wasn't at my school, who was another young female like me who just started out, they were also experiencing the same problems. So what I wanted to do was create a network where people could come together who were like me, who had just started out for the career, were young women in education, and just sort of discuss the issues and see if we could come up with some of the solutions to some of the problems. Because, for example, how do you tackle inappropriate comments in school? How do you deal with that? And every time on my network I've asked that question, nobody has the answer. People say, well, I've experienced this. Yet at my school, no one's really addressed it, or they didn't know how to address it. So it was sort of a network for people to come together, like I said, to discuss those issues and try and come up with a solution. Because I think sometimes as well, if you're the only one that's experiencing it at your school, it can feel quite lonely. Whereas if you know that other people are also experiencing it, then you know, okay, well, is it just me? There is also other people who are doing that. And like I said earlier, I created it through Teach First, so they really like coached me and helped me to develop that. And I think young women education is just starting out, because I think I've really struggled to find the time to run it alongside everything else, which I know we've already discussed. And especially as you go through your ECT years, you get more responsibility, you get more workload, which means that sometimes your network, unfortunately, sometimes falls to the bottom of the pile because you're so tired when you come back from the end of the day. But I think just having that human education network there, and I think just having it as a support network for people, is my proudest achievement. Because, like I said, when I put the idea out just on my personal Twitter that I want to create this network, I think I had over 600 likes or something like that, which shows there was a need for this network. So yeah, sorry, I feel like I rambled a bit there, but
No,
yeah,
no,
so
you
it's just
didn't.
a case of having it there for those people supported, because it was needed. And I am just proud that I did manage to set that up and reiterated to people that actually, yes, there are women's networks, but actually those just starting out in education, they do need their own network a little bit, just for that extra support, because it's scary, like leaving uni straight away and going straight into teaching, and being totally unprepared for it, because you go in and it is really overwhelming. And I think just having people there who are in the same boat as you and who you can support each other with.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ella. That's really great, comprehensive overview. And there's a couple of things I want to pull out of there. I think the one, yeah, I totally get it when you say you set up a network and then you're really busy and it's really hard to run. And I think that's what's happened with us and EdConnect as well. Like, yeah, finding the time, one, to just network yourself for your own development, but then to run a network, if you can do that as well, like hats off to anyone who decides to do that, including us in the room. And I think like the key thing, which I know, Kemi, you'll probably pick this up as well, is establishing a network because of the need for it. And it just does make me think, like you've both sort of discussed. I know we haven't asked, given Kemi hasn't given her response yet to the question I've asked, but you've both sort of said how your networks have been born out of a need for representation in different ways, and for different needs. And it makes me think, I wonder how many more people there are out there who don't feel represented and don't have that, maybe that sense of belonging, and how many people are out there and there's not a network for them at the moment. So it's like, I mean, you two have both done a fantastic job in creating these networks for the needs that you saw, but it does have that question at the back of my mind. I wonder how many other people like there are who need a network, who might not necessarily have one at the moment. So that's really interesting. Thank you so much, Ella, for that. So Kemi, so the same question to you in terms of the Young Black Teacher Network. I know your network's a bit been going for a bit longer than say mine and Ella's has. Yes, sort of. How, I know you briefly touched on why you started it. How did it start? What sort of activities have you done? What are the achievements? What were the barriers and the hard things that your network and your network committee have navigated? And sort of where next for the Young Black Teacher Network?
So we started in 2018. I think it was around December time. I was just sitting in my room, and it's been in my mind. It's been on my mind for a while. It had been on my mind for a while, but then I just had to start researching how many Black teachers are there in education. And at the time, it was less than 2%. So I thought that statistic is quite disgusting. So I just put a tweet out there and to connect with other Black teachers in London. And the plan was maybe to just meet up, go to Starbucks or Costa, and just maybe not vent, but just to have that safe space where we can say what we are really dealing with. How is it from our experience as Black teachers? And then I went to bed, and the next morning I'm seeing thousands of retweets and likes on the tweet, and I got a bit anxious because I thought, when you just see so many notifications, you're thinking, did I say something wrong on social media? But it was positive. The response was positive, and I was just collecting names and email addresses so that I can get back to people and let them know what the next steps were. So that came to mind in December 2018, and then in February 2019, during half term, we had our first senior leadership and networking event. So that actually, it was a free event, and literally in 5 minutes, all the tickets were gone. And it was great because every single person volunteered to speak who came, senior leaders. And it's so funny because I never even knew there were that many senior leaders in London that I could even reach out to. I was like, wow, where have you all been hiding? In 2013, when I needed to see this, I never saw it. But 2019, 6 years later, they're popping up. So that was good. So that's how YBTN started, the Young Black Teachers Network. That was in 2019, and we hit the ground running because in 2019 alone, from February to December, we had about 10 events. So we had a mixture of events for NQTs and trainee teachers and NQTs. If you want to get into senior leadership, how to negotiate your salary as a woman. We had an event with Diane Abbott in the House of Commons on teacher retention and what does that look like for our students, especially Black students, and most importantly, Black Caribbean boys, who are 4 to 6 times more likely to be excluded from school, as well as the policing of Black girls. So we had that event. We had an event with the NHS about the importance of giving back blood, especially in our community. We don't have as many blood donors as we'd like to have. We also celebrated our 1-year anniversary. We had a Black Men in Education event as well, where we had over about 80 Black men in the room who were all teachers, middle leaders, senior leaders. So within that 1 year, we did do a lot. And then COVID hit us, so we decided to go online and do things, online, which was all new to me. And we had a 10-week Black Studies program for students as part of our Give Back program. We thought, let's give some parents some time to maybe do house chores or whatever. Let students come and learn about Black people in history during the Tudor times, the Roman times, the science of Afro hair. So we can just learn more about ourselves. So we've done a lot, and I'm happy with the impact we've made so far. But I do know and I do understand that there's still a lot more to do. And similar to what Ella was saying, so I take my hat off to you, Ella, because during my early years, I was not going to do anything more than just planning my lessons, marking my books. I was too stressed and overwhelmed. So starting a network very early when you're getting used to the sector, it's intense because I'm finding it difficult even now. And obviously with more responsibility, I have less time. So similar to what you were saying, Ben, ensuring that you have the time to network and also run your own network as well as working full time. It is difficult. It's like a juggling act. You're just trying to balance everything. And I do admit there's more effort that needs to be put into the Young Black Teachers Network right now, but my new role as an assistant head teacher has taken up more of my time. But thank God I have a team of other teachers as well. And where every single person's in a leadership role. So everyone's time is limited because we are all volunteering our time to the Young Black Teachers Network, but we are all working full time, you know, so having to balance everything and how life for everyone is different, whether people are getting married, having children, you know, moving areas, moving homes. So we're all trying to work together to ensure that the Young Black Teachers Network keeps going, to ensure that we are supporting young Black teachers as well. And when we say young, we don't just mean young in age, we mean people who are young to the career, because people are changing careers all the time. People are coming into teaching from, I don't know, banking or social work, you know, all different areas. So we just want that if you're young in the career, if you're new to the career, we want to ensure you have the support you need. And one thing I do want to mention is that we are more inclusive as a society. We still have a very long way to go, and there would be no need for the Young Black Teachers Network if we were already so inclusive and diverse. Because I've had people say, but why is it for Black people? Why do you only have a network for Black people? And it's because I never had that safe space when I was training. And it's what I needed. If there was no need for it, I would have never started it. If there was no need for it, people would not be attending our events. And I'm happy we're becoming more inclusive. I'm happy we're becoming more diverse. But until everybody feels seen, feels heard, feels valued and supported, there will continue to be a need for the Young Black Teachers Network, for young women in education, for EdConnect. So, you know, I'm just glad we're doing the work now so that teachers coming up after us, they have a safe space in all these different places.
Yeah, thank you, Kemi. Sorry, it took me ages to unmute there for some reason. But yeah, thank you so much. I think like you've both provided a really comprehensive overview, and like hats off to both of you for all that you've achieved with your networks. And I think, Kemi, you make a really good point about like, you know, will there be a time where we don't, for some of these networks, where we don't need them? And if whilst we still need them, some obviously will be around for forever, and many will, I'm sure. But yeah, especially in terms of representation, yeah, like will we get to a point like where we don't need that? And I think that's really important. One thing that we've talked a lot about is time. That's a big thing that's came up. I think it would come up in any discussion with teachers about time, regardless of what role you do, what sector you work in, what phase you work in, what size of school you work in. We've talked about time for networking, for personal networking. We said that was a barrier. One thing we found at EdConnect is we've had fantastic volunteers involved with EdConnect from the beginning. I knew very early on from setting it up, I couldn't just do this on my own. Sort of how do you sort of empower volunteers to come and support your networks, and how do you ensure those volunteers stay and you retain them? I'm not sure about Ella, whether you are just on your own or whether you've got some other people working with you. I know you've said about Teach First, but my question sort of is, it's sort of two sections really. One, how do you get people to support the development of your networks and not just attend events as like a guest, but support your development of network, whether that is a volunteer or just sort of amplifying you? And who has supported you with your networks, if anyone? Kemi, we'll come to you first and then we'll go to Ella after, if that's okay.
So when I first started YBTN, I started it by myself. However, the first event, I roped in my sister-in-law and two of my friends. And it wasn't, I never asked them. I just kind of said, you know, you're going to help me at this event. So they just kind of came on board as volunteers. So that's how I got them three involved. And they were all working in education. My sister-in-law is a head of year, and my two other friends are teachers, primary and secondary. And then as time went on, after our February event and the March event, I had people come up to me at these events and said, we want to be involved. We want to help out. We want to do something. We want to be a part of this because we can see the potential. And this was when we had like, I don't know, maybe on Instagram, we had like 500 followers, right? So we're still building. We're still trying to get many people to follow us on social media. And then, yeah, one person came up to me at this event saying, I want to lead on this, or I would like to help you out with this. Another person came from somewhere else. And what I was telling you about the power of networking is that some of these people, it's not even that they wanted to volunteer themselves, but they said, I want to connect you with someone who I feel can be of benefit to your network. And that was how a lot of our volunteers came on board. So it ended up being people saying what they would like, they would like to be a part of us, but be part of the network, what they would like to bring to the table. And then we've now grown into like a family. So there's 11 of us now. We started off as myself for the first couple of months, brought in my sister-in-law and my friends 2 months later. And then within the first year, the rest of the team, as months went by, they were added. So, and they've been so helpful. They've been such a blessing. And it's just what everyone has brought to the table are their own individual networks. So from 11 people, they've brought in people from their own schools, their own areas. We've had people who went through the Teach First program. So they brought people who were on Teach First. And it's just grown from there. And I think when people can see that you genuinely want to make a difference, it was never my goal to just be like, I want to start a business to make money. It was, I want to help someone else. When they saw that, they bought into that as well. So it wasn't, I didn't have to, try and force anything. They wanted to also have that same level of impact and add to what I had started, which was very inspiring to me to know that there are people out there who genuinely want to see you win and to help you and to also help themselves. We all want to move forward in life. And I think in terms of people joining the network, supporting us, it was something that they had not seen for themselves. It was something that they had not experienced for themselves. So we also asked people, what would you like to see from us? What is it that you would like to see? Earlier on, when I was telling you about going to CPD that's not relevant to you, what's the point? So there's no point of us putting events that may not be of any benefit to anyone. So we want to know, what is it that would support you? What is it that would support you, whether you want to go into a head of year or head of department or a senior leadership role, or if you just want to be a classroom teacher because you're so impactful in the classroom. And that is the heart of what we do, making sure we're helping students. What is it? How can we help you there? And once people know, and they saw that, okay, we're giving advice, we're giving tips, we're putting on events, a mixture of free events as well as paid events, because not everything, this cost of living, not everything can be free. We have to also pay for things. What people also realize is that because we are so passionate about it, everything to do with YBTN, I put my money where my mouth is. I put my money into the network. I'm doing this to benefit and to help and to support them. So they can see that passion. They know that there is something bigger than just me, bigger than just us as teachers, that what we do now will impact the life of every single child that we come across, that we teach, that we have communication with. So I think that is what has kept us going. People seeing your authentic self, people seeing how genuine you are, people seeing that you want to help, you want to do more, you want to give back. Because one thing that I've learned from women like Alison Creel, from Nadine Bernard, is you have to pass the ladder down. It's not, it's not just about, okay, you now get there, great, stay there and keep everything to yourself. If you're going to network effectively, you have to pass the ladder down. And my dad always told me, always be good to people, because you never know where you might cross paths again. And there's something that Issa Rae, the creator of Insecure, something that she said a few years ago that has stuck with me. She said, networking is not always vertical. Sometimes it's horizontal. You have to network with the people beside you. You can learn. If you're a middle leader, you can learn from other middle leaders. If you're a classroom teacher, you can learn from other classroom teachers. If you're a senior leader, learn from other senior leaders. Not everybody wants to just, progress and go up from classroom teacher, middle leader, senior leader. Everybody has their own goals, their own dreams. So learn to network sideways as well as vertically, so you can be impactful in so many different ways across different platforms, different networks.
That's great, Kemi. Thank you so much. Really, really great explanation. I think the importance of, that buy-in from people, and seeing your passion, I think is fantastic. Thank you. Ella, same question to you. Sort of, I know your network's much newer. How have you had people support you? How have they empowered you? How have you empowered them to sort of develop your network further?
I think so at the moment it is just me running it, and I think that's something that I have struggled with myself, finding people to do it, because like I said, time is really precious to teachers, so it's very hard to find people, especially when something's quite new, to obviously encourage them to do the same, or just because of time and stuff like that. And my own time as well, like trying to find people and recruit them. But I think it's just from other people, just I think because obviously it's quite hard when you're running something on your own. I think I found it really interesting to you, Kemi, and how you found people to help run your network. So I think just how I felt empowered by it is just having people still encouraging me to keep going with it. So just having people say, no, this is really needed. You need to keep going forward with this. Or when I go to, so I went to a network event with Teach First, where I met other networks from Teach First, and we really worked on, well, how can we develop our network further? And again, speaking to people, networking with other networks, and them offering me their advice and offering me their services really empowered me as well. So I think it is just keeping it going, showing a lot of resilience, because I think it is really needed. And like I know that I will get there, and I will find people who will help me want to run it. So it's just showing that resilience, keep networking, because like you were saying, Kemi, you can often find other people who are in the same boat as you who want to do it as well, who are on the sort of same level as you. But like I said, that is one of the big struggles that I found, is just finding other people who want to also help run the network. Because obviously a lot of people were in the same boat as me, and they've just started out. So they were either just ECTs or just RQ, not RQT, sorry, underqualified teachers. So again, it is just finding people. And like I said, that is something that I have struggled with. But so this has been a really useful section of this networking event for myself as well, from hearing from you, Kemi, where your network has been really established. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Ella. I'm glad it was useful for you to discuss that. Yeah, and I think we totally relate to that as well. Like, we've had sort of peaks and troughs in terms of, like, say, volunteers helping us support us. Obviously, we shared that timeline at the beginning of the event. Yeah, we've been quite dormant for the last sort of year, again, because of time, and having the volunteers to add that capacity. But also that importance, which you picked up there, Ella, as well, about networks working with other networks. We're all in this boat. We're all finding that, the more established networks tend to have more people. So, like, one network we learned a lot from was Women Ed, as a very established network. They've obviously been going for a very long time. They have a very large team of volunteers who run a fantastic network. And I remember I once met with Vivian Porritt, who's one of the co-founders and part of the strategic leadership group of Women Ed. And she said, and I never thought about it, and that sort of helped us curate one of our events. She said, we need to network the networks, which, if you're part of Teach First, where they have their network family, that's quite easy because they have a team of people who are employed full time to do that. But when you're just network, say, outside of that, which we were initially, and so on, it's about remembering that importance, isn't it, of working together and sharing with one another. Because if we've all three are struggling with time and capacity, so I'm sure that's the case for all networks. So how can we work together to do that? That's great, thank you. We're coming towards the end of our panel discussion, but one thing I wanted to talk about, as this event is for early career teachers, and I know, Kemi, you sort of touched on this earlier in the discussion, was it's a big thing for if you're new to a career, and particularly also if you're young and it's your first ever career, to go and network. That's something we've sort of established. I mean, I run this network. I'd find it really hard to go to another networking event on my own and not know anyone there and how to navigate that space. So what sort of tips could you provide, whether that be in person or online, whether that's through using, say, social media, attending online events, or in-person events? What would be some tips you think you could share with others in terms of combating that sort of anxiety or worry, or developing that confidence? Kemi, we'll come to you first, and then we'll get to Ella.
For me personally, my faith plays a big part in who I am. So before I go anywhere, before I speak to people, I am going to pray for myself, for the event, for other people. And I think that gives me confidence, because it's just my personal beliefs. That gives me confidence to step out there and, to know that, okay, I can do this, I'll be fine. I still have anxiety sometimes, but I know my prayer is like, God, just be with me. Second of all, I think you also have to be a bit shameless in the sense that I would happily jump into someone's DMs and say, hi, I've seen you've done this or you're doing this and I'd like to know more, or this is who I am, this is what I've done, and I'd like to tell you more about that and how we could work collaboratively together. Anyone who knows me, I will DM anyone. You could have millions of followers. You could be, I don't know, you could be so famous, but I'll still send a DM because I have no idea if that could make a difference. And if it does, then it's worked in my favor. If it doesn't, I have nothing to lose because you know, I've just put myself out there. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. The more you put yourself out there, the more people get to know you, your network. And I think it's easier now because we have social media. So if we use social media effectively, we can use it to our advantage. Whereas going out and speaking to people, that's a different level. You need to have those social skills. You need to be a bit more confident in, you know, actually approaching someone who's standing in a corner somewhere and, you know, to start a conversation with them. So I think that is something that each individual will have to work on themselves in terms of their levels of anxiety, because I know I definitely had a lot of anxiety. But when it comes to social media, it has made it a lot easier to connect with people that I probably wouldn't be able to reach. I wouldn't be able to connect with otherwise. As in, networking should not just be locally, it should be nationally and internationally. Because that's how, even through my network, through knowing other teachers who we were working at the same level, I was able to get, you know, to work in a school in Dubai. I was able to work internationally. So just things like that has elevated my career in different ways. So I think be shameless, of course, still have integrity, still be authentic, but be shameless in the sense that if there is someone out there you would like to connect with, send them an email, send them a DM, just anything you can do to just get through to them. And then you never know where that next step or that conversation could take you. You never know if that person might not be able to help. They can connect you to someone who can, and that opens your doors even more. That opens your network. It makes your network even much more broader, much wider. So that would be my advice. Build up your own confidence. If it's your faith, if it's your affirmations that you have to tell yourself to get yourself pumped up and ready for that event, do that. And use social media to your advantage. Use it effectively. It's not just for memes and jokes, which obviously can be for that as well, but it can also help to elevate your career and connect you with people who can help you. And if they can't help you, they can connect you to someone who can.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think like it sort of comes back to that. If I think about, you know, how we discussed in private sector in particular, there's lots of networking events that go on naturally, and people you do know, well, I know people, friends and stuff who got jobs or, like you say, move countries or things through that networking. And I think as teachers, because it's not sort of a natural part of like our thinking for quite a lot of teachers, we don't see it as the opportunity for that, the opportunity to meet fantastic people. Like I've met fantastic people mainly online through different networks I've been involved with, and it's not giving me, say, change my career prospects in any sense. I mean, I'm only really early in my career anyway, but those people have given me so much opportunity for thought, people to support me, but also for me to support them at different levels in my career, at different levels in their careers, and just people that you can, like you say, can we DM and ask a question to that you might not have someone nearby physically in person to ask. So that's great. Thank you, Kemi. How about you, Ella? What would you sort of suggest, do you think?
I think start off small. So like Kemi was saying, start off with social media. Make sure you follow. So there's obviously teachers on Instagram, there's teachers on Twitter. Follow them, because often you'll go to these networking events and you'll go in and there's someone like, oh, I follow you on Twitter, or oh, I follow you on Instagram. So then actually when you go in the room, you're actually not as alone as you think, because if you start off small and do social media and you're asking people, well, does anyone have this resource? Does anyone have advice? The chances are it's only quite a small community, the teacher Twitter and Instagram. So often you will go to these networking events and know someone. And I always think it's just good to have perspective. You're an ECT who's doing a job that not many people could actually do. Think about how you got to where you are now, and actually think you teach a room of teenagers or teach in a room of 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. Actually, going in a room with adults who also probably have the same issues or problems or the same questions you have isn't that scary. So I think it's just sometimes just having that perspective. because often I will go to a networking event, I'll ring my mum and I'll be like, I'm really nervous, I don't want to go. And then afterwards she'll ring me and she'll go, how was it? I'll go, oh, it was fine, I really enjoyed it. So I think it's just having that perspective that actually you're going to enjoy it more than you are going to hate it or loathe it. And like I said, you'll take something useful from it and just think, the job that you do, not many people could do. Not many people could stand in that room in a full of 30 teenage boys or 35-year-olds. So just have that perspective before you go in and think of how far you've got here and how far, like, where you are now. And I think that's just really important to remember.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ella, for that. I think that's some really good from both of you there, actually, really good practical tips on how to navigate, curate that network for your ultimate benefit of the children as well, because, you know, having all these different thoughts, perspectives, even in some cases resources just to help, or especially if you're in teaching, like thinking, oh, how I'm really struggling with teaching this, how to do this, or I'm really struggling to engage my year 11 science group, how can I what are other people doing, that sort of thing. And I think that's really good. So thank you so much, because we've got a real great wealth of information there from this discussion. It's been absolutely fantastic talking about net before flew by, and I hope those of you watching, whether you're watching live or watching this back, get a lot from it. In terms of how to navigate, curate that network. So please do check out our Twitter, because you'll be able to find Kemi and Ella and be able to connect with them as well and their networks. Do check out their websites as well for the networks and how you can find out more about them. So Kemi and Ella, I just want to say on behalf of us all here at EdConnect, thank you so much for giving up some of your Saturday for free to share your experience of networking with others as well. I think that's really important. We really do appreciate it. And I'm sure that your advice and your sharing of thoughts this morning will really impact on those watching. So thank you so much. And I hope you go and enjoy the rest of your Saturday and have a rest. And we'll hopefully see you tomorrow. So thank you so much, Kemi and Ella.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice Saturday.
Thank you. So we are now going to have a quick break until about 20 past 11, so just about 15 minutes. And then I'm actually going to be speaking and sharing what I wish I'd known at the start of my career. After that, we've got Sarah joining us, who is an international teacher and part of our network committee, who is going to talk all about inclusion. And then we have another overseas teacher joining us, Lima, who is going to talk all about international teaching and how to navigate that space. So we will have a quick break, so do have a bit of a comfort break, get a drink, whatever you need, ready for us to start back at 20 past 11. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to this, the second part of our event this morning. Now, I'm actually going to speak now, so I'm going to get my slides ready. Naya, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about the event so far, or introduce me, if you like.
Sorry, my mic was off. No, fine. I mean, you're perfectly fine to introduce yourself then as well, if you want to.
I can do it if you like.
No, it's fine. So I think so far we have had a great morning. As you can see from a lot of tweets and everything. I'm just going to remind everyone, can you just kind of make sure that you're tweeting, so we can have that uploaded, and we all learn best when we learn from each other, right? So you never know, things that I don't pick up when I'm tweeting, someone else might have got that as a tweet. So can you please make sure that we're tweeting, and it all goes up on a profile throughout the whole of today and probably tomorrow as well. So if I introduce Ben, because Ben's going to speak now, he is the founder and co-chair of EdConnect, as you all know already from his introduction this morning. He does work in a primary school, and he's also a middle leader, which focuses on personal development. He will also be speaking at a personal development conference, isn't that right, Ben?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Can't remember when it is, but Ben can tell you all about that. So yeah, I am going to let Ben do most of the introduction. So here it goes, Ben.
Thanks, Naya, and good morning, everyone. Again, I'm obviously talking in a slightly different lens now. I'm talking about what I wish I'd known at the beginning of my career. Now, I'm still really early on in my career anyway, but I'm going to go through some key things that I wish I had known. So the first one was the importance of context. So when I did my teacher training, I had 3 placements. They were all great. I trained half sort of in COVID, half not in COVID, half in COVID. And my first placement was in a very inner city school, very similar to the school I work in now. Loved it, really liked the challenge, really liked the context. I then did 2 placements in the same school, which was a village primary school in a really leafy village. And that was a completely different context. And I really enjoyed that as well. And I learned a lot from both. And I think it's really important when you are learning and starting your career that you really consider the importance of that context and how it impacts on you, your development and your teaching career. And it's something I don't think I considered as much when I was looking for a job, for my first teaching job. So I think that was really important to talk about and think about and reflect on. And linking to that was the importance of belonging, that finding that in any context that you work in or training, that you have the opportunity to feel like you belong and to know that you belong. I feel that I belong in my current school, and I've found that whilst the context and the community I'm serving is very different to the community I grew up in and was educated in, it's been really important for me to consider this as a teacher and as a leader as well. And I think it's what's rooted within all elements. I sort of realised this on my teacher training, but it was something that I've now realised as a leader as well, is that importance of relationships, building relationships and nurturing them as well with children, with adults, with parents, with staff, with governors, with members of the community, that relationships have to be at the heart of everything that we do. And that if we don't get them right, then we won't be successful in what we're wishing to achieve. And I think that's a really important thing to constantly keep in our minds and to be aware of. And I think linking to relationships, linking to context, one of the things that people talk about a lot is behaviour. The importance of behaviour, managing behaviour. It's talked about in the teacher standards. It's talked about in the ITT core content framework. It's the first thing you look at on the early career framework as well for many providers. And context and behaviour is really important. And it's important to consider when looking for a school, when looking at teacher training providers, what training are you going to get on behaviour? How detailed, how developed is that training? Does that behaviour management system, process, policy link to your values? Is it something that works for you and your values? And I think it's really important to remember, in terms of context, that behaviour and actually that behavior is often not because of you. And that context, you have to know about that whole child. One of the roles I've taken on this year is I became a DSL, a designated safeguarding lead, and I learned so much more about the children in my class because of that role, but also children across our school, and really was able to build up that picture of those children and find out so much more about them because of they're building that picture and that context for them. And that's where the safeguarding comes in. Ultimately, you have to remember your first role in that classroom as a teacher, whether that's be as a teacher, whether it's a teaching assistant, whatever role you are taking on, that safety is the first thing that we consider. And I think we all know that, but it's ultimately, you know, when you think you need to be the best teacher you can be, actually, for some of those children, the best thing you can do is keep them safe for 6 hours a day. And it's really sad that we have to think of it like that. However, it's a reality that's becoming more and more, and a narrative that's becoming more and more common. So ensuring that you're keeping them safe is really important. I didn't realise, if I'm honest, linking back to that context, the impact that would have on me, and also the how prevalent it would be in the current context I serve, in the community I currently serve. It might be different in a slightly different community. Ultimately, we have to remember that safeguarding, it can happen anywhere and everywhere, but ultimately that you have to consider that within your context and the workload that comes with that as well. And I think one thing that I felt the need to, as someone who came into education, it's not my first career, it's my second career, that importance of pacing yourself and being the best teacher you can be and the best professional you can be. It's not a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you shouldn't feel that you've got to rush your career, that you've got to be a leader by this age or by this many years, and you've not got to be doing all these other things. And you've not always got to be the best teacher. You want to be the best teacher that you can be. Some days you're not going to be the best teacher you can be. Actually, there isn't a definition. There's no such thing as a perfect teacher, and your practice and your development is constantly evolving. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to feel the need that I have to perform in this certain way and I have to be fantastic and outstanding all the time. And it's just not sustainable. So making sure that you're celebrating those small little wins in the classroom every day, and that you're celebrating yourself as well, and you're amplifying yourself and saying well done and giving yourself that pat on the back, I think is really, really important. And that should all come down to that your development should be focused on being that best teacher. And I'd change it to teacher. I'd say the best professional, the best person. And there's a number of ways that you can do that. It's very easy in teaching to become all encompassed in the world of teaching, in the world of education, when actually we're humans. We're humans first. And I know we talked a lot about in that panel discussion about other sectors outside of education, outside of the public sector, that being the best person you can be, being the best professional you can be, will make you the best teacher you can be. Sometimes you can't be your best self, and it's about then having those relationships with others within your setting to support you to be your best self and to pick you up when you're not being your best self. And I think ultimately you have to remember, as a result of that you come first. You know, yes, the children are first. The children ultimately are first. But if you didn't show up that day because you're overworked, you're knackered, you're unwell, and you've made yourself unwell, there'd still be someone in front of those children. Yes, it wouldn't be you, but ultimately you've got to look after yourself first before you can look at others. Sarah Mullins said at one of our previous events, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I think that's so prevalent and so important for us to think about. And I think that you've got to put your well-being at the heart of you. And we talk a lot about EdConnect as well-being. It's one of our key priorities and core values as a network, and we will continue to talk about this. And I know Annabelle's going to provide a very comprehensive presentation later on this. But well-being looks different for everybody. So I think one thing I should have recognised earlier in my career is what well-being looks like for me. And there were some things I didn't realise. And so some things for me that mean a lot for me are walking and just getting outdoors, Reading is a one for me, listening to podcasts, and then traveling as well and visiting new places and making sure you build that time in to do those things. And it can feel quite strange at first that you're not doing schoolwork and that you're really busy. One thing I've found, particularly this year, is I'm really busy with social events, networking events, traveling. But actually, it feels really good to be busy. So whilst I'm knackered when I've done all these things, it's because I've got that reward of being able to say I'm looking after myself and I'm enjoying my life, not just doing work. So figuring out what works for you, I think, is really important, and what your well-being looks like. So I hope that sort of thread there has shared with you what I wished I'd known in my career. I'm about to sneeze. I do apologise. Sorry, don't suppose you want to see that on YouTube this morning. But I hope that's helped make you think about what some things that you want to consider for your career. So thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions that the audience has later on. So please do send them in via Twitter or pop them in the chat. I'm just going to stop sharing for now. So we next have Sarah. Sarah is currently an international teacher, specialising in special educational needs and inclusion, and she's also joined us as one of our network committee members. Sarah is based in Dubai, and we look forward to hearing her talk today. So I'm just going to add it into the stream. So good morning, Sarah.
And morning, everyone.
Thank you for joining us from Dubai. And also Sarah has stepped in at the very last minute to provide a talk, as we are, as unfortunately Michelle, who was one of our speakers, has unfortunately come down with COVID and isn't very well. So we hope she gets well soon. So thank you so much, Sarah, for stepping in at the last minute. And Sarah's going to talk all about inclusion. So I'll leave you to it, Sarah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. So my name is Sarah. I've been teaching for 4 years as an SEN teacher, but I've been in SEN education for over 10 years now. And it's something that I'm just so passionate about. I did my PGCE in a special school, and then moved to a different special school to continue my EQT year, and then go on there for 3 years, and then I just moved to Dubai. I came out in August, working here as an SEN teacher. And it's something that I'm really, really passionate about. Moving to Dubai was quite scary, but it was always a dream of mine. So to say I've achieved my dream is just incredible. And part of my role here is I'm working as a SEN teacher, still as a class teacher, but supporting children in what we call our life skills provision within a mainstream school. So children who need their SEN bespoke setting, but they also have the amazing inclusion opportunities within a mainstream school. And my mindset on inclusion has changed this year, just seeing the amount of opportunities that my pupils have had already. And it's just incredible. So knowing that already there's been an impact on those pupils, not just mine, but also across mainstream and also across those members of staff, it's just amazing. And it's something I'm really passionate about continuing doing. And eventually, when I move back to the UK, I hope to implement that model when I come back into a different school, wherever I end up next. So I'm kind of talking today about strategies, how you can support SEN within a classroom, simple strategies that are effective, that I've used over my time as a SEN teacher, and also that I've learned from others. The big focus today is all about networking. Networking is such an important part of teaching. Instagram, incredible. I've met so many teachers, both in the UK, but also before I moved to Dubai, I was talking to so many teachers, and even the ones who are in my school already. It's such a great way to get to know other people, and education is such a small world, it's unbelievable. So what I'm talking about is kind of strategies for SEN. So for example, we've all heard of EHCPs and what they are. In the UAE, we use IEPs, but the EHCPs, they are written with the school SENCO, the teacher, parent, and any multi-agency professionals. And these derive from the SEN Code of Practice, and ensuring that you have the cognition and learning targets, communication and interaction, sensory and physical needs, as well as SEMH needs. All these targets are completely bespoke and personalised to individual pupils. So there's not a one target fits all. It's completely bespoke to that specific child. So what one child has in the classroom should be different to a different child, because they have different needs. And working with professionals is such an important part of working with SEN pupils, whether it be speech and language, OT, physios. Use them as a tool, and also share your celebrations of what you've learned as well over that time. But always think back to what is the impact. You know, obviously always go on by these 3 I's: intent, impact, implementation. How are we doing that as part of our learning and as part of supporting these SEN pupils? At the end of the day, although I'm a specialist SEN teacher, we're all teachers of SEN, because that is our duty. We have SEN pupils in our classrooms. There are increasingly more SEN pupils in mainstream. It is our job to support them. And look at the bigger picture. You know, where do we want them to be in the future? Not just in next year, not just in 2 years' time, but looking at the end of primary, whether in secondary, post-16, think of the bigger picture. So, for example, ensuring that you've got activities that are not just abstract. The thing I hate if I go into another school and I see SEN pupils just sat there doing worksheets. There's a time and a place for worksheets. However, using abstract, hands-on, physical, practical activities, make it multisensory, fun, immersive. It needs to be engaging. Otherwise, it's going to be game over from the start. You need to really entice that child into learning. A big thing in maths, part of the school that I'm in, is using manipulatives. And they do this across mainstream. So it's going to be a brilliant way to introduce all these things into your classroom. Use of visuals. I am a lover of visuals, and you'll hear me go on about using symbols. Symbols are amazing. The things like Widget is a great program to be using. You can also make it bilingual, so it's good for your EAL learners. But they're simple, they're easy to read if your children are not able to read at the moment. But also as part of a visual timetable, for vocabulary, it's a great way. And ensuring that you have a good solid routine in your classroom. Things change, and that's fine. But if you have a symbol to represent, it's going to change. It's going to decrease any behaviours you're going to have in your classroom. Differentiation is part of our teacher standards. We know what all that means, but also look and think, how is it achievable for our pupils? But also, are we challenging them? Having those high expectations. They might have a one-to-one in the classroom, but also make sure you as a teacher have the time to go and sit with that child. Again, I've been into classrooms where the child is just sat in the corner with a one-to-one and the teacher doesn't engage with them. Make sure you have that time as a teacher to go and spend time with them. And get to know them, have those expectations of them, because at the end of the day, you're still responsible for that child. You need to know what's going on. But using all those things, using motivators. What do you know about that child? Do they like cars? Do they like princesses, for example? Use those motivators as a way to get to know that child. Using now and next boards are a great way if your child is struggling with timings. So, for example, if they struggle with keeping to pace in a lesson. So give them 10 minutes and then 2 minutes choosing time. Break it down. So 10 minutes of work, 2 minutes cars, and break it down. Increase the time as you get to know the child and they become more confident. And use the sensory toys as well is a really great way. Use clear and simple language. Give the child processing time. Children with SEN need a lot more time to process, 5 to 10 seconds sometimes. And more often than not, I see people repeating the instruction. That child is still trying to process what you said the first. So slow down, just wait, and give them the time they need to process what you're asking them, and then repeat it after 10 seconds, and then support them, guide them to do that. And also communication is a big part of what we do. So we do Slime of the Week. I've always done that in any class that I've been in. It's a great way to develop Hackathon in your classroom. Even in the school that I've been working in, I've been teaching some of the Key Stage 2 pupils Hackathon, and they've been doing Signs of the Week. And we've just been residential with some of our pupils, and seeing the impact of those pupils using Hackathon with mine was just amazing. And that is just a few ideas that you could be using within the classroom, something so simple. There's so much more we could talk about, but I hope it's helpful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Sarah. Really useful tips there. And I think for someone myself, if I think about myself, SEND and inclusion, it's such a big area, but it's often too big to learn about as a new teacher, and you often learn about it along the way.
It's very overwhelming as well.
Yeah, it can be when you've got all these needs you need to meet and not necessarily knowing how to do that, and sometimes often feeling deflated when you can't do that. So I think giving those practical tips that you've just is really useful. Thank you. Sarah is going to be rejoining us in a bit once Lima has presented as well. We're going to have a bit of a Q&A between Sarah and Lima on the areas that they've presented on. So thank you, Sarah. Look forward to seeing you again in a bit. So I'm now going to add Lima into the stream. So Lima is an international teacher as well. And we found out this morning that actually Lima and Sarah work in the same school, and they'd only just realised, which was when we think about the power of networking, we talked about that in the panel discussion this morning. It just shows you how much of a small world it is, even when we've got teachers presenting from Dubai as well. So Lima is going to talk all about teaching overseas and teaching abroad, as for many of you, we know this might be something that you're considering, whether you're training to be a teacher or whether you're already a teacher and think about making that move, wherever that will be. So I'm going to add Lima into the stream. So good morning, Lima.
Hello, or good afternoon from sunny Dubai, but good morning.
Well, yeah, sorry, I should say that. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. So I'm going to leave you to it for 10 minutes to talk about all things teaching abroad, and look forward to Q&A afterwards.
Amazing, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I first of all apologise if I keep looking down. I've written some notes that I want to try and remember to say everything this morning to help you guys out. I'm going to do a kind of 101, very quick overview of some of my top tips for you to consider if you do decide to move abroad. So first of all, a little bit about me. About 4.5 years ago, I was at Derby University. I was training as a teacher. I did the 3-year BEd course, and whilst I was there, I visited family in Dubai. I did a bit of a school placement, and I thought, oh, I could move, but no, I'm going to stay in the UK. And then it got to kind of the end of my course, and I thought, you know what, I'll just send a few applications. What's the worst that can happen, right? And here I am, almost 5 years later. I'm in Dubai and I absolutely love it. I think it's one of the best places in the whole entire world. So hopefully I can give you a few top tips if Dubai or somewhere else in the world is somewhere that you are interested in moving to. I'm just going to get my notes back up. So I'm going to give you a few tips. There's so much more I could talk about, but I'm going to stick to a few that I hope will be helpful. The first one that I'm going to mention is, as I say, I'm in Dubai, but there are so many amazing countries in the world that you can move to. I know there's teachers that love teaching in Singapore, in Spain. There's such a huge variety of countries. I think the UAE is always a bit of a hot spot for teachers to move, and I don't blame you guys because it's amazing. But I would suggest really writing down what you want out of moving abroad. Is it that you want to be able to travel to certain places? Is it money motivated, which again is absolutely fine? Is it a certain culture that you're looking for? Is it that you want to immerse yourself in a certain language? Is it that you want to be by the beach or in the mountains? What is it that you really want out of moving abroad? Why is it that you're like, I'm done with the UK or wherever I live now and I want somewhere new? Make a little list, because every country will be right for one person, but will be wrong for the next. So it's just really worth having a real think about whether it is, yes, Dubai, I want to move there, or whether you might think, actually, I want something more slow paced. Maybe Spain's the place for me, or maybe I like the city lights of Singapore. So that's my first thing, is maybe having a think about where it is in the world that you would really kind of fit in and would work for you. The next thing that I would say, this is one of my most important things, is narrow down your schools. Now, I get messages from people that are like, I've applied for every job on TES. Help me, what can I do? What can I change in my application? And literally the first thing I say to them is, don't apply for every job on TES. The only way I can describe it is, if you, wherever you are in the world now, if you look at the city or the county that you're in, would you go on TES and be like, I will apply for every single school in this county? There's probably schools that you're like, oh, I know that school's not for me because of this reason, or that school's a bit far away from where I live, or just a whole variety of reasons why there's certain schools that might not be the fit for you. And it's exactly the same in Dubai or in anywhere in the world. There's schools over here or in another country that would be your dream school, and they would be the fit for you, and they'd fit your ethos and your style of teaching. And then there's schools where you might think, oh, actually, this isn't the type of school that I want to be in. It's a bit too big, or it's too small, or it's just not what I'm looking for. There is a whole host of information online. We do get inspected, unlike if you're in the UK, it's Ofsted every X amount of years. In Dubai, we're every single year. So we have a whole host of information on every school. A website that I always recommend is called Which School Advisor. And if you go on there for the UAE, they've got really easy to read reports. You can look at things like staff turnover and how big the school is and what curriculum they teach. And then I'd say really narrow down your kind of 3 to 5 dream schools and put everything into those applications, because tailoring everything to those applications is much more likely to be successful than having a generic application to 20 different schools and being like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. So definitely narrow down your schools just as you would if you were in your home country. So that's one of my biggest things to think about. Another thing that I would say is be ready to go out of your comfort zone and to do crazy things that you probably wouldn't have thought that you'd do if you were in your home country, including saying yes to so many things, meeting so many new people. I think when you move abroad, it can be really daunting, especially if you don't know anybody in that country. And it's really easy to be like, okay, it's the weekend, I don't really know anyone, what shall I do? But honestly, it's so normal in any country where there's a lot of expats to be like, hey, I'm new here. Does anyone want to hang out? Does anyone want to do this? And that's the way you can make some of your best friends. Some of my best friends, one of them randomly messaged me on Facebook and she was literally like, will you be my friend? That was literally her message. And now we're best friends. Another one had posted saying that she wanted to do like an exciting new activity. Did anyone have any hobbies that were a bit out there? And I mean, it wasn't that exciting, but me and my friends that weekend were going roller skating at this new roller skating place. And I was like, want to come along? And now we're really good friends. So it is definitely a go out of your comfort zone situation and saying yes to everything and throwing yourself out there and being open to meeting anyone at any place. And you will have the best time ever. And the last thing that I wanted to say, which is where this platform comes in so handy, is making the use of social media and networking and all those different things, because echoing what Sarah's just said, the amount of people that you can meet on like Instagram and Twitter is crazy. I know so many of the teachers that I work with have presences on Instagram and on Twitter, and you can meet so many people from different schools and they can give you a real first-hand insight into that school. Because like I say, obviously you can read all the reviews and kind of the reports in the world, but to speak to someone who actually works in that school and actually experiences everyday life in that country, in that city, is so valuable. So learn from them and ask them questions, because the biggest thing about moving abroad is that every expat that is in that new country or new city was you once. Every expat was sat in their home country, ready for that one-way flight, probably really, really worried and really scared like you are. We have all been in that same position. So everyone knows the exact feeling of when you're getting that flight and you're arriving and you're like, what have I done? I remember when my mum dropped me at the airport and I walked up to the desk and I was just like, I've got a one-way flight to Dubai because I'm moving there to teach and I'm really scared. And she was probably, the lady at the desk was probably like, are you okay? But it literally felt like the worst thing in the world at the time. But it was the best decision ever. So if you are thinking about it, I would definitely recommend it. Please feel free to reach out to me, my little teacher Instagram thing, because I don't have anything snazzy to write under my name, is just below. So please feel free to message me anytime. I'm more than happy to ask questions, because when I look back at when I applied, I didn't do any of that. I didn't kind of reach out to anyone. I was just like, oh, I'll just apply for wherever. That landed me in many sticky situations. But anyway, I would recommend reaching out to people, chat to me anytime. I'm more than happy to give you the lowdown on Dubai, or moving abroad, or anything from the different schools here, or how to get internet, or anything that you need Dubai-wise. Please feel free to message me. And I hope that this has been a little bit helpful. And I look forward to a bit of a Q&A next. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lima. That's really interesting. I think it's such a big move anyway. It's such a big thing to do. And like you said, and I think one of the things like you said there, which seems to be a theme coming out this morning in terms of networking and social media, it was something you didn't really have as much when you first started out. So actually having people like yourself on social media and having this sort of event really helps. So thank you. And thank you for your offer for people to message. I've messaged Lima myself and she's brilliant at giving that advice. So do go and message her. So I'm sure she'll be very pleased to help. So I'm going to add Sarah in now. So we're going to head just now. For those of you watching, after each sort of group of speakers, we're going to have a little Q&A for 20 minutes. It is your opportunity. If you want to ask any questions, you can pop them into the chat function. If you have questions after the event, feel free to DM one of the EdConnect events, either on Twitter or on Instagram. They are at EdConnectNet, and we will pass the questions on to those speakers who can share, and we'll get them back to you as soon as we can. So first of all, you both taught abroad. You're both teaching abroad, and then Sarah, you just moved out this year. Is that correct? Yeah. And Lima, you've been there ever since you qualified. What's the best thing about teaching abroad? I'm going to come to Sarah first as someone who's new, and then Lima, who's got a bit more experience of it. So Sarah, what would you say is the best thing about teaching abroad?
The best thing for me was getting to know people from all over the world, but also for me, it was to get a better work-life balance. We talk about that a lot and how important it is as teachers. And I just needed something where I could still enjoy my teaching, but also have enjoy the weather, be outside, and be able to do that as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, Britain's not known for its great weather at certain times of the year, so I'm sure it is a great thing. Lima, what about you?
I would just say the opportunity to do things that are completely new. I think it's so easy to stay in our little bubble. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, if that is your vibe, then that is 100% your vibe. But for me, I was like, I have to get out of the bubble. I have to do something new. And it was kind of if I don't go, I'll never know. So I think it's the opportunity to try new things, have new experiences in a different country that you wouldn't get back in your home country. And just to try it, because the other thing that's worth remembering is when you move abroad, it's like you have your 6-month probation, or you can leave up like at the end of the year if you really need to. But if you just come and try, you never know. And it's only one flight to get back home. So it's always worth trying. And yeah, you just don't know if you'll love it. And if not, it's not the end of the world, and you can head home anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip for people. There's probably lots of people watching this or thinking, or even not watching this and just thinking about teaching abroad, really toying with the idea. Some of those people probably toy for their idea for the rest of their career, and then before they know it, it's gone. I'm probably one of them people as well. I'm including myself in that.
Move to Dubai.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime opportunity, it really is. So it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, if I think to my teacher training, like I know someone who from my cohort of university who's done that. She's actually teaching in Dubai. She's gone straight into teaching Dubai right from the beginning of her ECT year. It's something I don't know. I could just be, so this might just be my experience, but so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like when you do teacher training, it's not something that's really talked about. Like when you're at a university or at the teacher training provider, it's not. It's all about, you do your training, you get a job, but it's never sort of like talked about, oh, well, maybe you could do it abroad, or like you would often hear people talking about, say, like a different setting, so maybe like a special school or alternative provision, and maybe talking about your career development. What do you think? Do you think that that statement is correct from your experience of your teacher training? And do you think, what sort of information do you think should be out there for people? Lima, I'll come to you first, and then I'll come back to you, Sarah, if that's okay.
So for my course, we did have kind of an elective module where you could choose just to go to, it just had to be like a completely different setting. So like I said, I did do the 3-year course, which will be different to PGCE. But we could choose, say, to go to a special needs school, or we could choose to go to a forest school, or you could choose to go abroad, which I was crazy. And that was just a blessing that because my family live here, so that was just something that was very lucky, because they were like, when you're 18 you can come and visit. And then when they had this module came up, I was like, this is the time, I'm gonna come. But yes, I remember at university, and I remember finishing, and we were talking about our jobs and our new jobs, and it was like, oh, because I was in Derby, it was like, oh, is anyone going to like Sheffield, is anyone going to Leeds? And I was like, is anyone going anywhere else? And I was like, Dubai. And everyone was like, are you okay? One thing I'll really quickly say before we let Sarah talk as well is I do always recommend, just as someone who came here as a newly qualified teacher, for a whole billion host of reasons, I do always recommend that people do their ECT in the UK first, just because I think it's such a good grounding. And I think for a lot of people, like I was thrown in and I was like, okay, this is fine. But I think for a lot of people, I mean, I cried like every day of my, like it was amazing in so many ways, but it was tough. So I would just say being around your family or your friends at that time would be really important. So yeah, so I think there does need to be more chat about it, but maybe what things people can do in their ECT year to then have an amazing application after those 2 years to then come over is what I would say for uni.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think, like you say, because actually teaching internationally, I know, Lima, you started teaching in a very large school, didn't you? And then you've moved to a school that's now a bit smaller. And I think that could be I work in a one form entry school at the moment. And I know if I went from that to like, how many form entry was your initial first school? 20.
Are you all ready to pass out? We have 26 classes in FS.
Wow.
Yeah. So 26 classes per year from one. I know I'd find a massive culture. Find a massive culture shock going from one form to two form. So I think, that's a big thing. Like, it's not talked about. I remember I worked with a teacher previously who'd done it the opposite way around, that he worked internationally and worked in an international British school, but hadn't worked in a British school in England, and came, and he was like, wow, like all the things that he found out, he was just like, wow. So I think that, like you say, it's really important, but that grounding of your ECT years and as well, like being around people that you can support us better. And Sarah, what about you? What in terms of teacher training, recruitment, in terms of working abroad, what do you think could be better? What was your experience of it?
I completely agree with Lima. Doing your ECT here in the UK is a great grounding first, because moving abroad is already stressful enough and a big move, and it's going to help you in the long run. If you get that experience in UK first and then going into an international school, it's not so much of a shock. And you've got those couple of years grounded already, you've got that experience, and it will help you in the long run. For me, I did my PGC in Buckingham, and we were kind of slightly exposed to it, because the way we did was kind of like almost like a school's direct placement, because we already had people who actually did a PGC from Dubai, and they were actually coming to the university in Buckingham to do their PGCE with us. So we already knew, it's like, oh, you're doing a PGC in Dubai. I didn't know that was possible. So we already had that information almost. And I was also quite lucky that the uni tutor that I had, she was also the tutor for Dubai. So she would come to us in Bristol, but she'd also go out to the PGC students in Dubai. So we were pretty exposed to it. So already from then, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Dubai, it's always been a big dream. But knowing that actually it is possible was even better. So I think in some universities it's talked about, but it obviously depends on what the criteria of each course is. So I think it's unique to every university.
Fantastic, thank you. And yeah, I think, like you say, it's such an important experience, and any experiences you can get to enrich your career in terms of teaching abroad, teaching different settings is really important. Thank you. So talking a bit about inclusion now, I know, Sarah, you spoke about this. I know, Lima, you were speaking about teaching abroad, but it'd be interesting to get your perspective as a teacher as well. In terms of inclusion and working in an international school, if you compare it, Sarah, to, say, when you worked here in the UK, do you feel that there are much differences in terms of SEND and inclusion, in terms of provision? What are some of the, say, biggest things you've noticed from moving from the UK to Dubai in that sense?
So in Dubai, we don't necessarily have special schools. We have what we call therapy centres, which is more for your kind of low-level sensory learners. Whereas in the schools, you have provisions. But these are still quite new and upcoming in Dubai. I know the school that we're in is quite unique. And we are one of the only schools who has that. So we're quite lucky to have that provision. So I think there's other schools who are kind of implementing that model more into their schools now. But the school we're in is very unique in doing that. Inclusion for me is definitely, my mindset has changed on it, because working in a special school, everything's included, inclusion is there because, it's a specialist setting. But going into a mainstream school, I was very apprehensive at first, thinking, oh my gosh, what on earth am I doing? Because I haven't done mainstream for a long time. But actually working with these SEN pupils, they still have their SEN classroom, but being part of a bigger school, actually it totally works. And I know Lima works with a lot with some of the children, the younger children in my provision. And actually, it totally works because we're teaching the staff and those children, but also our children learn about the SEN and autism and stuff. And there's so much more opportunities available. And already through the inclusion opportunities we've had across Key Stage 2, it's just been incredible. And I've cried so many times because this is just amazing. I've never had this opportunity before to do all this. And for me, for my professional development, it's great because I'm not only just teaching, but I'm also teaching other people. I'm training. That's a part of exciting. So for me, it's very different, but in a positive way.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Sarah. And Lima, I know you obviously have trained in the UK and then worked just purely overseas in Dubai. How have you found like inclusion compared to, say, your teacher training and how you prepared for that to actually working in a school in Dubai? Did it prepare you? Didn't it prepare you? Or was it totally different from what you imagined?
So it's really interesting because obviously every cohort that you have each year is so different. And interestingly, this year is my first year where I have a child in my class with a one-to-one, like an LSA. And I remember at the beginning of the year being completely overwhelmed, not in a negative way, just because it was new. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a new dynamic for me. This is something new that I've got to get my head around. How is this going to work? How can I make sure I give this child like everything in the world that they need? And it has been the best thing ever. I've absolutely loved it. I think in terms of university, comparing into when you actually teach, everything you get taught is so different when you actually do it, because once you're thrown in there and you're getting that actual hands-on experience, there's always an element of kind of learning and picking things up as you go along. I think uni can prepare you so far and your placements can prepare you so far. But when you're thrown in at the deep end and you're like, okay, this is this year's cohort and these are kind of different aspects that you've got to kind of take on board, it's very different, but in an amazing way. It's just been so fascinating every year having different children that have different needs and different requirements, and kind of it really broadens you as a teacher, and I think it really expands your little teacher horizons. And yeah, it's been amazing. But yeah, I'd just say that it's when you're actually in it is always going to be very different to like what you learn in uni. I think nothing can really prepare you for the broad range of kind of things that you need to make sure that you do. But yeah, you figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose and that's the same everywhere, isn't it? It's just interesting to see how I think sometimes people might have this perception for some reason that special needs and inclusion isn't as relevant if you go and teach in school and that sort of thing, and it's really important that actually all schools have children with additional needs of some sort. They might manage those and meet them needs slightly differently and have different people in different roles, people like Sarah in those roles to help them with that. So it's really interesting to hear that, so thank you. Now in terms of, I know today's event is sort of, we've talked about lots of different topics today. So we talk about inclusion, we talk about teaching abroad, talk about networking, well-being, and so on. In terms of networking then, as it's a common thread that seems to be popping up about how networking can help and support your development and your career and just your well-being. What has your sort of experience of networking been? How did you sort of start? Have you found it useful? And how have you found it useful? So I'll come to you, Lima, first, and then to Sarah.
Okay, so is this an overall general networking?
Yeah.
So I, when I moved out here, I didn't really have a network. I was lucky that I had my cousin here, but in terms of like a teaching network, I moved to a school that had many, many schools. And that was nice. I guess it's a bit like an academy in the UK, or like schools that have different branches of schools where you get that opportunity to network within your schools. And I think that's something that's always also, in terms of like we said about social media and things like EdConnect, but also if you're part of a school that's like a part of an academy or part of different places, kind of different schools, it's really, really valuable to access that and go to those different schools and meet those different teachers, because every single school will do things slightly differently, and every school will kind of have a speciality or something that they're amazing at that you can learn from and pick up from. So I did a bit of that in kind of the last school group I was in. Now I would say it's massively, like social media is a massive help. and things coming up like EdConnect is just makes such a huge difference. So I would just say throw yourself into it. Again, in terms of talking about like bubbles of countries, it's also so easy to stay in your little school bubble. But every single school is different and every single teacher has something that they're amazing at and something to offer. So always feel free to ask questions, go and visit different schools. So yeah, I just say it's super important. And yeah, there's so many different ways these days that you can network. So.
Thanks, Lima. And Sarah, what's your experience?
I think for me, when I was in NQT, it was quite hard because there wasn't a lot of networks around, and I almost wish I knew of EdConnect then, because that, during the lockdown and stuff, that's when I was in NQT, and it was tough because you didn't feel like you belonged, especially when you're in SEN. It's a smaller world anyway, and you don't feel like you kind of belong to a network anywhere. So I wish I knew something about it before, because it would have been such a great opportunity to network with other people. Social media has changed the amount of networking. I think my partner said, "Oh, Instagram." I was like, "What's that?" A few years ago. And then suddenly I started posting things on Instagram. I was like, "Oh, okay, people are liking my posts. This is weird." When you're just posting about, your general teaching life and then what you're doing in school and stuff like that. And then suddenly, you then get a small following, and it's weird how all these things change, but also then the impact of that, because like I said, I've made so many friends through following on Instagram. And moving to a new country, it made things a lot easier, because already I knew people who were also new to my school. We'd already been talking for a few months, so we got to the airport. "Oh, you're so and so." Yeah, and then already you got that connection. And then moving into, when you start with induction, you're already getting to know people. So it's so important to build those networking opportunities early on, both in UK and abroad. And I just feel like there needs to be so much more said about networking as part of PGCs as well and NQT years, because it's just not really talked about.
Yeah, and I think that came out of our discussion this morning, that confidence too. And you sort of like touched on that there. Like, if I think about myself, I'm someone who used to not really use social media a lot, like personally, a couple of years ago, and professionally. And it was something that just gradually like sort of evolved over time, and how your attitude and confidence changes towards it as well because of it. I think it's really interesting as well. Going to wrap up sort of the Q&A now, but what I would sort of say, what question I want to ask you now, thinking back your early career, and for both of you, it's actually not that far since your early career. You're still in your early career, both of you. What would be your one sort of key learning point that you sort of didn't realise that you'd probably want to share with others? What was like a sort of a big, like a top tip or a key experience that happened that you would want to share with others? So I'll come to you first, Sarah, and then to Lima.
My first one is, as an NQT, you're eager to please. You want to do everything and you want to showcase who you are, but also don't be afraid to say no, because it's very easy to go, "Yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do it." And then suddenly you look at your work and I think, "Oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do this?" Don't be afraid to say no, but also don't be afraid to ask for help. That is it's a hard thing to do, to ask for help. I remember very early on when I had a lesson observation and having a class with some challenging behaviours, I just cried at the end of the lesson observation. So this is awful. Like, this is, but ask for help. And from then on, it was fine. So you just have to be honest, and it's hard putting yourself out there. But also a big thing for that work-life balance, we were taught in university, have a handbag day. Don't take your laptop home, leave it in work. Just go home with your handbag, and that's it.
Thanks, Sarah. And Lima?
This actually weirdly links in a little bit. I would say always, always, always want people in your classroom. When you're early on in your teaching, ask for people to come into your classroom, because I know, and it's a real shame that in so many schools, having like a lesson observation or whatever, it becomes a bit like a fear thing, and you're scared and you don't want anyone in, and someone hovers outside your door and you're like freaking out, but you want people in your room. I cannot tell you how much I've learned from SLT, other teachers, people coming into my room, and I'd be like, "Okay, I really don't know how to teach this maths concept. Please, can you like come in and help me?" Want people in your room, because that is the best way you can learn, is by watching other people teach and learning from their expertise. So you should always, always, always want someone in your classroom, which sounds really crazy, but honestly, it's true.
It is true.
I think that's a really important. There is that fear of observations, whereas they're probably one of the best developmental opportunities. As long as they're done right and done by the person in the right way, they're actually the best I can't speak this morning. I can't say it, but developmental opportunities that you can have. So especially early in your career as well. So thank you so much for both of you, for one, your presentations, and this Q&A panel, but three, giving up some of your time on Saturday to share some tips and tricks. So please go and enjoy your evening, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks,
Ben. Thanks everyone for watching.
Okay. Right, two fantastic speakers. So now we've got Annabelle, and Annabelle's going to deliver a bit of a longer presentation to us, all about teacher work-life balance, which is where she specialises in her role as a coach, but also mental health and well-being. So I'm going to add Annabelle in. Good afternoon, Annabelle. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was like, I better say something, make sure my mic works okay.
You're coming through loud and clear. Do you have any slides you're sharing, or you're just going
No, I'll just talk today, Ben. That's absolutely fine.
Fantastic. Right, well, I'll leave you to it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So as Ben kindly introduced me, I'm Annabelle from Balance for Teachers. I'm a teacher's work-life balance coach, and many teachers out there might be thinking, is that even possible? Can you actually have a work-life balance? It can be possible, but it comes from regaining your own power again and appreciating that if we want to be understood, we have to first understand ourselves. So a lot of the work I do is about helping teachers to reduce anxiety, switch off with ease, so that you can have that work-life balance to allow you, or life work, if that's how you prefer to look at it, to allow you to have the resilience, the energy, the ability to focus and be a lot more productive in the time that you work, so that you can be more efficient. And I was loving the previous guests, because when they're giving that advice about getting people into your classroom and having the ability to have a handbag day, these are all vital things that, yes, you want to start from the get-go, but also over the years, you want to remember this. Like, I work with teachers that have been in teaching for 20 plus years. I work with other teachers that are just getting to that 5-year break point where burnout's starting to creep in. So being aware of your needs and your personal requirements is invaluable. And that's why I've come on today to talk a lot about mental health and well-being. So mental health and well-being is a huge topic, right? It's one of those topics we talk about all the time. You see posts all the time. All of this stuff goes out there, yet we don't always consider what mental health and well-being actually looks like to us. So I want to help those that are watching today. And if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, I know if you're teachers, teaching assistants watching, any educator watching, I'm pretty sure you've got a pen and paper nearby. Or a phone will be absolutely fine. Just have somewhere where you can note down your thought in this moment, no right or wrong. So mental health and well-being is a massive topic, and it's very unique to each individual, which is why it can be very tricky as an SLT member or a governor trying to manage, whether in a school or academy or another education institution, work-life balance. There are so many things we can do as an education system, and it's massive, so it's not going to change overnight. There's a lot of things we can do as an individual to support ourselves as we develop. So part of the ethos at Balance for Teachers is helping one individual at a time to create a ripple effect throughout the education system. So everyone watching, I'm hoping that you can give this a go today. So when we think about things that we want, such as a good mental health and well-being, we get to consider, what does that actually look like for you? Because when we say, I want to be happier, I want to be calmer, I want to be more focused, that's great, but it doesn't give you the steps to get there, and it doesn't define what that looks like to you as a person. So when teachers come to myself and they're like, I want a work-life balance, the first question I ask is, great, what does that look like for you? Is that 2 nights off a week? Is that every night off each week? Are you working 40 hours a week, or are you willing to work 50 hours a week? Once you decide, you can then work your way to that destination. So write down for me what mental health and well-being looks like for you. If you had a good mental health and well-being, What would you be doing? How would you be thinking? How would your day look? What sort of things would bring you joy? By actually deciding these things, you can start to put these into your life. So it might be, for instance, that for you, you want to be thinking positively. Possibly you want to have more energy. What does having more energy look like? What will you actually be doing? Maybe you want to be calmer and more present. Is that with your family? Is that with your friends? Is it that you just want to have a bit more mindfulness? And what does mindfulness actually look like for you? Do you want to work less hours? If so, how many less hours do you want to work? I've got a client of mine that's just done our 12-week program, and she went from 70+ hour weeks to then dropping 20 hours by the end. So in just 12 weeks, she managed to take out 20 hours of her working week and minimize that down and actually become more productive, healthier, happier, calmer, because she changed that makeup in her every single day. Is it that you want to have time for things like crafting or diamond art? Maybe you want to spend more time with your kids or your friends or your family. Maybe it's that you want to read more books and not feel like you're trying to cram in that book at the end of the day. You're actually able to sit there, have a nice cup of tea, put your feet up, and just enjoy a book. Whatever it is for you, that is for you. So what helps your mental health and well-being is something that also projects outwards and not just inwards. So yes, you might want to have more energy, but okay, what does that look like? Maybe you're eating, maybe you're having lunch, maybe you're actually having a lunch break, and that might be something that's important for you. So if you had a good mental health and well-being, what would that look like for you? And it doesn't have to happen overnight. It's just something you can work on in the process. So good mental health and well-being, sometimes for humans, it's not easy to think about the positive, like what that would look like, because we've not been there yet, we don't know. So you could do a couple of things. You could think about someone else you've seen and something that you like and you've seen in someone else that works for you. It might be, and this is the great thing about networking and connecting with the educators, is because you're able to go, oh, I love what they're doing there. I'm curious, how do they do that? Like, what is it that I could do? Because that looks really good for me. So it could be that you're using your network in order to allow you to see what kind of work-life balance you desire, or what do you need to have a good health and mental well-being. It could be that you are in a position where you're able to go, okay, well, at this moment in time, I don't always think positively. So it's easier for me to think about what I don't like and then flip it. And we're going to do that together in a second. Or you might, another coaching technique that has been used out there is to imagine yourself in a year's time, and you have, or 6 months, however you want to think about it. And you are in a position where you have good health and well-being, whatever that is for you. You can then write yourself a letter now and explain how you got there. You could gift yourself advice from your future self. It allows us to break away from the moment and get out of our ego, our headspace that holds us stuck in this reaction mode, and takes us into a place where we can respond. Another way to do that is, what if you were giving someone else advice, maybe a student in your classroom or a colleague, and they've come to you saying, you know, I'm always thinking negatively. I think I'm moving into depression. I can't do this anymore. I want to get out of teaching. What advice would you give them? By disassociating yourself from the immediate situation, you're allowing yourself to open and broaden your mind to stop the mental chatter. So there's a couple of ways that you can actually gift yourself a bit more of a definition of what good mental health and well-being looks like for you, or how you would like it to be. Now let's just backtrack a little bit into going from negative to positive. So if you're in the situation, and maybe the strategy of like writing a letter to yourself, or having a strategy where you're thinking about a colleague, a student, and how you advise them. If you're really in that, we call it ants in your house, where you have these automated negative thoughts, and you're very much in that burnout stage where it's all in your head, you can't see the wood between the trees, you're really struggling to find a way out, then sometimes the easiest way to start is to start where you're at. So write all the things you don't like right now. What are the things that you're fed up with, that enough's enough and you don't want that anymore? When you write all those things on, say, the left-hand side of your paper, you can then flip them. So it could be, I'm fed up with feeling negative all the time. And then you might flip that into, I want to change my thoughts to positive thoughts. I hate feeling tired all the time. I want to make sure that I'm in bed by a certain time so that I can be awake the next day. I want to ensure that I have a lunch break so that I feel like I can get through the day without crashing at the end. So by writing the things you don't want, you can then start to write the things you do want on the opposite side. So it could be, another example is, I'm working all the time. Well, how about we flip that from I'm working all the time to I'm working 40-hour weeks or 50-hour weeks. And these are the times that I'm going to work. So there is no right or wrong. We can get stuck in that mindset. What we want to think about is, what do I want? What does part of me want? And that's how we start to learn to put ourselves first so that we can actually help others a lot more. So when you flip these things, it gives you the opportunity to find out what you want and need to allow yourself to have that mental health and well-being that we're all after. And I'm going to have a little bit of an Annabelle bombshell moment here. So Annabelle bombshells are just when we have coaching calls in our community at Balance for Teachers. There are aha moments, or moments when people go, oh my gosh. And that's because we have these certain stories or perspectives of the world. And especially when we're in a classroom on our own, it can feel very much that you're stuck in this one mindset, or you have this one story. But when you reach out there to others and you start to connect with others, you start to see the opportunity of like, oh, actually, there's another way of looking at this. There's another perspective. What if that were true? And that's that's coaching. That's not just coaching, but it's having human contact with others and seeing different opportunities and outsets. So the Annabelle bombshell is that there is no perfect mental health and well-being at all. There's no destination you're going to reach and you're suddenly going to go, I'm here, I made it. You might wake up and go, and I have myself woken up and gone, oh my gosh, I'm so happy in my life right now. I'm just grateful for everything I have. And no, it's not perfect. Not everything is running super smoothly. And sure, I still have a to-do list that needs to get done. But I have the ability now to be calm within the storm. I can put things to one side and be like, okay, I'll do that later without overthinking. I can go to bed at night and just switch off and fall asleep. And these are all gifted because I was able to look at, okay, what in this moment do I need? Not what is the destination I'm trying to reach, or how fast can I get there, or how quick can I fix my mental health. You're not broken. No one's broken. We're just in the moment, not listening to what our bodies need. We're not listening to, why is it that I feel low today? Is it something physical? Maybe I'm going through menopause. Maybe it's perimenopause. Maybe I've had a bad day at work or an argument with someone. Maybe something's irritating me. But your body is having that emotion because it's trying to tell you, or physical response, it's trying to tell you something's up. Anxiety is not a bad thing. It's actually a system within your body to say there is a potential threat, whether that is real or perceived. We need to just pay attention and support ourselves in that moment. So in terms of trying to reach that perfect mental health and well-being, it's not there. And trying to rush to the end, it's not there. Mental health and well-being is unique to you as an individual. So just decide, what is it that you want and need in this moment, and enjoy the journey of getting there and finding that the journey is actually the destination. It is life at the end of the day. As soon as you find that feeling of well-being, I'm now there, but guess what? I'm still thinking, oh, do you know what? I would love to have a little bit more of this in my life, or I'd love to receive a little bit more of this, or maybe I want to go traveling, or maybe I want to do this. And that will help me to feel better. Maybe I'm teaching 40 hours a week, but actually I've decided I want to go part-time. That will feel better for me. There is no right or wrong. Whether you decide to stay in teaching or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is, are you living your life and not just existing? So a little bit about me and how I got to that feeling and where I got there. So when I was in my 20s, I was experiencing dissociative seizures. Now, dissociative seizures are when we break away from reality. So the stress had become so much, I'd bottled it down for so long, that it just started to come out of me in a seizure. My body would just shut down. So in my early 20s, I had to go on sick leave for a prolonged period of time. The stress was triggering all these different seizures, but I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was epileptic. I thought there was something going on. I lost my car. I couldn't drive anymore. I lost my independence because I then ended up having to leave my job. I couldn't go and get another job. I couldn't stay in the career that I loved. And therefore, I ended up depending on my parents again. So I'd left and then I'd had to go back and move back home again. And I was going in and out of hospital. There was loads of medication. At one point, I was taking 17 tablets a day. They couldn't figure out what was going on with me. And I remember waking up on my 21st birthday in hospital, looking around, and these ladies were reminiscing on their 21st. They were all in their 80s and 90s now, reminiscing on their 21st birthdays. And I remember laying in bed, waking up to that message from a mum saying, "Happy birthday, baby girl." And it still makes me emotional to this day because I felt so broken in that moment. And I felt stuck and trapped and low. And I'd been diagnosed already with severe depression. And I just thought, this isn't living. Like, I'm 21. I should be partying and having fun and enjoying life and experiencing things. And instead, I'm on this journey of feeling stuck and dependent on others. And so that kind of kickstarted the journey. And I went into this Big Brother house for 6 weeks where they monitored me. And these were the best doctors there are in this area. And I remember at the end of the 6 weeks, they turned around to me and said, "Annabelle, there's nothing we can do. It's all in your head. You're going to need to maybe do therapy or something like that, but there's nothing we can do in the medical profession." And I was fuming. Like, I wasn't doing it on purpose. It wasn't me doing it. It was just that it was happening. So I went on a 10-year journey and went from burnout to balance. So I worked my way through, and the burnout to balance journey led me to become an educated nutritional therapist, sleep expert. I've gone into mindset coaching, physical fitness as well, to understand the body holistically. And we created the balance strategy. So when Christmas, beginning of the pandemic, I was laying in bed thinking, how did I get from burnout to balance? And burnout to balance for me was a journey, a very long educational journey. But I took the balance strategy, and that was when on Christmas Day, I laid in bed. There was nowhere to go. We were in lockdown. And I thought, I'm not going to remove myself from this bed until I find an acronym, because I don't know about you guys, but I love acronyms. And balance became the acronym. And I teach the balance strategy now in a 5-day free Discover Life Outside Work challenge. And each time we run this, it's amazing to see the benefits. It brings so many others so quickly that took me 10 years. And in just 5 days, they're already finding balance. And for the 12 weeks, it's phenomenal, the change in which I see in educators. So balance, I won't be able to go through it all today, but the element of it is to breathe, to get awareness, to listen to yourself, to align your next step, cheer you, and evolve. So that is the balance strategy acronym. And this acronym is all about allowing yourself the opportunity to find balance again, to find the balance that works for you in that moment. It's not about looking for the latest fix or the latest answer. No one can do it for you. It's about learning how to save yourself in any given moment so that you can trust yourself. I talk about this a lot with clients nowadays, trusting yourself in terms of understanding that no matter what happens, you've got your own back. And for me now, that's liberating. It's freeing. I'm no longer dependent on others. I'm able to live my life freely and choose where I want to go next and choose what I want to do without anxiety and fear. Instead of its anticipation and looking forward to what comes next. So hopefully you have enjoyed my talk today. If you want to know any more, you'll be able to find me on Instagram, Teachers Work-Life Balance Coach. And also you can drop onto our website and join the next 5-day challenge if you choose. And that is www.worklifebalanceforteachers.com. So finding mental health and well-being, the most important thing is to understand and listen to yourself. And that's where the balance coping strategy came about, is just for me, step by step, understanding who I was and being able to stop my seizures, now completely seizure-free, which I'm very, very grateful for. And able to live dependently again and not feel like I'm worrying and unable to switch off. So it's possible. It's not just work for me, it's work for hundreds of teachers. So wherever you are in your mental health, start with where you're at, and then step by step, one step at a time, start to create the life that you desire.
Thank you, Annabelle. That was really useful, and I think really important topic to discuss for anyone at any stage in their career. And Annabelle will be sticking around for a Q&A very shortly with our last speaker I'm going to shortly introduce. But thank you so much for that. I think that's probably resonated with lots of people who are either watching live or do watch this back. So thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you.
Okay, and we look forward to having you for our Q&A very shortly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce our last speaker today. Rashida Din is our last speaker, who's going to be talking all about networking and unions in particular, so working with unions. Obviously, that's something that's very prevalent in the UK mainstream media at the moment and in the news as well. But I'm going to let Rashida introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about this area. So I'm going to add Rashida in. Rashida, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ben.
And thank you for joining us. And yeah, I'm going to leave you for 10 minutes and then we'll come back on with Annabelle for a Q&A.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to the Q&As afterwards. So my name is Rashida Din. I'm the Junior Vice President for the NESUWT. That's the Teachers Union, and I am the first Muslim. And the reason why I say that is because I feel that representation matters and I own it. You're quite right, Ben. Unions are in the news, okay? Right, so let me say a little bit about the unions to begin with. When the media talks about unions, normally it's in quite a negative context, right? You know, threatening strikes, disrupting education, causing transport chaos, etc. But I think those views are really to do with those that control the media, rather than the reality of the UK's workforce. Unions basically represent nearly 6 million working people, right? We're in every sector of the economy, not just education, private sector, third sector, arts, health, sports, local government, civil service, etc. When we think of unions, we think of the fact that they are a protection mechanism for us. And that is true, actually. You know, unfair dismissal awards won by trade unions are 3 times as high as those that are not backed by trade unions. Last year, there was wins of 320 million in compensation for union members, an average of 15,000 per member. But what's really important is workers in unionised workplaces are treated more equally and fairly. So just a little bit about myself. I have been a teacher for 27 years, okay, a senior leader for about 17. From grassroots, I started from the bottom up from Luton. And, you know, proud to say that I am the Junior Vice President for the union. And how did I get there? Well, it's to do with networking. We've got 300,000 members, and that gave me an opportunity to network. And it will give newly qualified teachers, ECTs coming into the profession, an opportunity to network, right? So you can get involved in your school as a representative, and you're going to talk to lots of people in your department, and it gives you like a common purpose. It's an opportunity to have solidarity and, you know, have things in common. From that networking, you can be part of a local association where you have all the schools in your town or in your area, that they all come together in a meeting and you discuss sort of matters that are, you know, indicative of the times. And currently there's lots of conversation about rights and strikes and pay rises, etc. But it's an opportunity to talk to one another. You can talk about other issues like, you know, mental health, pupil behaviour, etc. within those meetings. Normally there is a social afterwards. So for example, I'm planning to organise some meetings within my local area, and what we'll do is we'll talk the business and of the day of that meeting, and then we'll go out and do a little bit of a social, maybe bowling. But that's really important as well, because you're having that opportunity to peer network, talk to each other, share good practice, etc. But it's in that friendly sort of safe space. Unions, our union, for example, we have national working parties, young workers committees, and we're always looking for people to go on there. So if you want to make a difference nationally, okay, some people do, some people don't, but if you want to make a difference nationally, get onto that young workers committee, get onto the early years teachers committees. You can do things such as organise conferences, marches, rallies, training. You can say, well, actually, we need this particular bit of training. You know, if mental health wellbeing is an issue, then that is something that you can work with the trainers and ensure that happens as an offer. What's really great is that most unions, we have national conferences once a year. Ours is at Easter. This year it's in Glasgow. So, you know, it's a way to kind of come out from your patch and see what's happening sort of nationally. We've had conferences in Ireland, Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham, and it's so grassroots. It's an absolutely amazing experience if you can get there. You have speakers, you talk about motions, ways to change the educational landscape. There's lots of training on those days. Rallies, you know, and an absolute amazing opportunity. And, you know, you get help with your accommodation and with your transport as well. So, you know, that's one of the great things about unions. They will support you, because we were looking for grassroots voices and, you know, people to get involved at that level. And nothing should be a barrier. Money, finances should not be a barrier. What's also amazing is that unions, myself and other teaching unions, we have conferences. For example, we have the Women's Conference, BME Conference, Young Teachers, LGBTQI, and again, accommodation, meals, etc. You know, you're all supported in that. There's free seminars. But what's really good, I found when I first joined the union, was the leadership conferences, because you can go there and you can network with you know, head teachers, assistant heads. So if you're interested in developing your career, this is a great opportunity to go and talk to people that are in that position and kind of learn from them. And education, like anything else, you know, it's relationships, it's networks, building that peer-to-peer sort of discussion is so important. We also, for those that are really interested and you really want to go even further out of education, unions belong to a organisation called the Trade Union Congress, right? So you have unions from RMT, from the universities, you have transport, you have every single union, dentistry, doctors, train workers, you know, ship captains, etc. There's a maritime union, and we all come together once a year. And that, again, if you want to see what's going out in that big union world, that collaborative solidarity that we all, you know, are part of, that's a great way to kind of get involved at that level. So you can start, if you just want to be a rep, you can be a rep. If you want to do national, you can go national. Now, I'm in that privileged position that I'll be able to have an international focus. So next year, I'll be representing my union in Argentina, Buenos Aires. So, you know, I've got opportunities like that. So you can work your way up from a local school level to a local association level to a national to an international level if you want to. So there's great opportunities out there. But that golden thread which runs through all of those is the fact that you're going to develop your communication skills, you're going to develop those relationships, you're going to network, it's going to be that peer-to-peer, there's going to be advice, there's going to be all sorts of training, etc. So unions are not just there to, you know, be that protection for you, for that insurance for you. That is important though, mind, you know, that is important. But there's also that great opportunity to kind of work with each other and, you know, share your practice, take on board, you know, the good practice that you're going to be hearing. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the questions and answers. And Ben, thank you. Finished a little bit earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Rashida, for that. I think it's really important to explore and explain the role of a union, and it goes much beyond. I think often people just associate them with, you know, being there when something might go wrong and they're there to support you, but actually there's a whole much wider remit and breadth of service and opportunities for development and networking that they provide that people might not necessarily realise. So I think that's been really useful for particularly people in their early career. So thank you for sharing that with everybody. I'm going to add Annabelle back into the stream now, and we're going to have our final Q&A between the two of you. So One question, Annabelle, that I want to talk about is you've talked a lot about well-being and the importance of well-being and prioritising you. If you are, say, within an environment where you don't feel that you can talk to anyone, and I'll sort of pose this question to Rashida because it probably sort of linked to unions as well. If you're in that environment where you feel like you can't talk to anyone, you're in a school maybe or an organisation where you're not feeling great, where would you advise them to where to go next, kind of thing? If who would you contact? What organisations could support, for example?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of if you're feeling stuck, from hearing you say, if you're feeling stuck in the school that you're in, you don't feel that you can connect with your colleagues, or you don't want to cross the boundary, which happens with a lot of people, like with professionalism and being yourself. So sometimes if you're struggling with the mental health and well-being side of things, it's like, but I need to be the teacher and I need to be, like I know and I'm okay and everything's fine. I can't look weak. I can't look like I'm not doing my job properly because you fear the consequence. Then there are, obviously, as Rashida can put in a moment, she can explain more about unions and how they can support. There's also Education Support UK, which is a charity which has a telephone line that you can go to. It's completely free for educators. I think that's the right name off the top of my head. But you can, Education Support UK. They're fantastic. It's a free 24/7 line that you can phone. If you're looking for more of, as I said, with people that teachers I work with, they've got to that stage of enough's enough, or you're looking at wanting that connection, then not just myself, not just Balance for Teachers, there are a lot of coaches out there. So you can access coaches. But if you're in a position where you are worried about your health and well-being, it's got to nearing the burnout stage, then definitely go to your GP. Like if you feel that you're really, really struggling physically and mentally, then GP is a good shout just to get you direction of your local support. So they will be able to navigate if there's any support out there near you. But like I said, there is private health, so like Balance for Teachers and things like that. There are unions out there. You can obviously with EdConnect look at other connections that are out there as well. But I think there is sometimes we get stuck in this, I've only got the people immediately and it has to be someone in my school, and it doesn't have to be. A lot of schools now are hiring, especially academies and trusts, they're hiring outside support. So they're actually having someone come in as a mental health and well-being trained counsellor, therapist, coach, and then they are your go-to, but they don't tell the school anything. So there is a lot out there. You just need to be curious and explore your options and see what works for you.
That's great, thank you. Rashida, what would you suggest if you are in that situation?
I think Annabelle is spot on in terms of that. But a lot of times when you're newly into a career, you kind of feel isolated, don't you? Right. So you need to make that connection at that first sort of stage that you come in. And that's when unions come in, because there is a structure there that you can very easily participate in. And we're always looking for members. We're always looking for active members in particular. One of the courses that we do offer is mental health awareness. So there's a whole set of coaches that are developed every year, and sometimes what you could do is to actually access our courses and actually do a course yourself and recognize some of the issues that you yourself are maybe experiencing. Do you know what I mean? So you're getting the benefit from actually doing those courses and training as a trainer possibly. And as you say, if it comes to that stage, don't wait around for your school to support, etc. Do go to the GP, because that's where you're going to get, like you say, those grassroots support services. But I think initially, somebody coming in, you're going to feel isolated. It's a new career. You don't know what you're doing. You think, oh, lesson plan, I've got to go to this meeting, etc. Get that support from your colleagues, right? That's what unions do. That group in your school or in your association will be there to listen, and it's also a safe space. Sometimes it's easier to talk to people that you're not seeing day to day, but they can give you that advice and that guidance.
That's great, thank you. I think you both provided some really useful practical next steps that people could take if they were ever in that situation. So thank you so much for that. In terms of, Rashida, this is a question for you in terms of union, because obviously you represent NAS UWT. Obviously there's lots of different unions out there, as you talked about. In terms of if you're, say, a brand new teacher, training or early career, how would you suggest going about navigating, finding which union is right for you in terms of supporting you? What would be some sort of tips you'd provide people, potentially things to look for?
Right, so obviously I would say come to the NAS UWT. We are the Union of Equality. As the first Muslim woman in that role, I can tell you that we take diversity, especially as core in what we do. So if you're looking to take part at a local, national level, that is what I would be suggesting. We've got a great set of opportunities for young people. We've got groups, we've got national committees, etc. And again, our sister union, the NUU, have also got that kind of structure. But they don't have me, they don't have the first Muslim junior vice president. And I will be president in 2024 because it's a 3-year track. So I'm senior in September. So come join me.
Thank you, Rashida. Annabelle, I'm going to come to you now for a different question. In terms of well-being and workload, it's obviously something that's constantly talked about, and rightly so, and probably will be something that is constantly talked about for a very long time. Obviously, the majority of our audience are going to be aspiring teachers, trainee teachers, early career teachers. In terms of if you're looking for, say, your first ever teaching position, or say you find yourself that you're in a teaching position which is probably maybe not in the right school for you in terms of well-being and workload, what sort of things should people consider when looking for that teaching role in terms of like the type of school, and also what sort of practices within that school should people be asking about and looking for before submitting that application?
Yes, be picky. So in terms of, it's a fantastic question, Ben. So when you're starting out in your career, what you want to be thinking about first is, what are your core values? Like, what's your purpose? What are your core values? So what is important to you? Is it important that you have certain things when you're working? Now, you might not know straight away everything. And this is when, as you said, Ben, you might want to change schools. You might want to go somewhere else. That's totally okay. It's your career path. But understanding first initially, what are your core values and what do you want? So what are your core values and what do you want? So it could be, so for one of our core values at Balance for Teachers is that we want to make sure everyone's seen and heard. So whenever I look at my staff, or I look at myself, or I'm looking at my clients, I'm always going, are we seeing and hearing everyone? Like, are we actually approaching this in a way that everyone's being seen and heard? Or are we just adding extra stuff? Another one of our core values is keeping things simple. Like, are we overcomplicating things and wasting time for people, or adding things that are not necessary when we could keep it simple? So by understanding your core values, it gives you a map and a guide when you're looking at schools. And I always say to people as well, in any interview, it's not you being interviewed. You are interviewing the school. You are trying to say, right, is this the school for me? Right? Is this the school that matches my core values? And ask your questions. Really, talk to the other teachers, find out what it's really like. Maybe have a little walk around and whatever you can do to get as much of a feel as possible to say, right, is this for me? If we go with a reaction of, oh my God, I just need a job, like I just need to get in and do it, you're probably going to react and just end up anywhere. And you might have that. You might be lucky and it might be fantastic, or you might be in a situation where you feel disconnected, you don't feel in alignment. Maybe you've seen that, senior leadership teams just delegate everything down and you just feel your workload is increasing and no one's listening to you. Then that's a position where you go, right, okay, I can't change this environment. I'm just going to have to move somewhere else, but I need to know what I don't like here so I can find what I do like somewhere else. And I've coached teachers from being in a school they don't like into a job that's a dream job. And a year later, they're messaging me going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm now in my dream job. And all we focused on was, what are your core values and what do you want? What don't you like right now? And what would you like? The same as what I was speaking about in my talk. It's about getting clarity of who you are and what you want, and then looking for that in the schools that are out there.
That's great, thank you. I think you've pulled out some really key points there and practical tips of what to look for. For people who are watching this either live or watching this back, in terms of looking for your first job, our very first event that we did for EdConnect was all about securing that first job and finding that and what to look for. And Lucy, who was one of the speakers on that event, she started looking at the beginning of that process in terms of like what to look for. So also check that out and check what she set out as well, because that was really important. Thank you, Annabelle. Obviously, one of the key themes that's ran through this event today has been the importance of networking and building a network for support, but also for professional development and career development as well. So, Rashid, I'm going to come to you first for this one, because obviously you said in terms of NAS UWT, they obviously run networking events and provide opportunities for networking as well. So thinking that with sort of your role, your job head on, but also outside of your union, what would you say are some of the important things that people who are early in their career need to consider when networking, the challenges, the barriers, but also the key successes as well that can come from that?
I think it's really key that you're aware where you want to be in 5 years or 10 years, so you've got like a little bit of a track. Now, a lot of people think, right, all you need to do is to go off and do a leadership course and then you're going to walk into a leadership job. That isn't the case. Okay, obviously that helps and supports your application, but I think things like the soft skills, like your communication skills, your way of building relationships up with people are key. And in terms of what the networking does, that you might be able to find a mentor, someone to actually show or coach you into sort of leadership, what we call leadership behaviours. And let's face it, one of the ways that you stand to be able to get promotion, for example, is that if you know the right people, and the right people can see the skills that you're able to offer. So those sort of safe spaces like leadership conferences are brilliant. I'm actually going to a diversity meal, for example, and it's in the summer, right? And that is just pure for networking. And there'll be head teachers, CEOs, etc. And we as a union will be represented there. And I think putting yourself and having those discussions with people, I think, are kind of key, because it isn't all just about doing a leadership course. It's much more. You have to be, your skills have to be a little bit more developed than that. And it is who you know.
Thank you, Rashid. That's really useful. And Annabelle, what are your thoughts on networking and things? And I suppose for you as well, you obviously use social media a lot to engage with people. So what sort of things would you suggest to people? Oh, sorry, Annabelle, you're on mute.
There we go. Perfect. So in terms of social media, we have to be careful because there's a lot of noise. And when you are isolated, or you feel isolated as a teacher and you go on social media, there is loads out there. There is loads. But we can get into that. I had someone called it compare book instead of Facebook once, because we go on, then we start comparing, then we start shaming ourselves, thinking we're not good enough. And we actually ingrain these stories even more. So when you are networking, it's important to network with curiosity, right? Network with an open mind, rather than going into networking and going, well, they're better than me at this, or they do this better. Be curious and go, okay, I'm curious. How do they do that? If someone says something, I'm curious, send someone a message and go, oh, I love what you did with your classroom. Could you tell me a little bit more? Did it take quite a long time to do that? Or did you have a shortcut? And this is where you can go. So we have a free Teachers Work-Life Balance community on Facebook. It's called just that, Teachers Work-Life Balance Community. And we post coping strategies and advice. And then we have an anonymous ability to anonymously post and say, look, I'm struggling right now with this. Does anyone had any experience? So we had someone the other day post, I'm looking to come out of a temporary contract and go into a full-time contract somewhere else, but I'm going to have to leave early. Has anyone else done that before? And that's the benefit of networking, is that when you feel anxious about something you've never experienced and you feel isolated with where you're at, we often get stuck because we can't see the next step. But there's so many people out there, especially if you're just starting in your career, there's loads of teachers with years and years of experience that can turn around and go, you know, this is an option. It's their opinion though. So always remember, it's their opinion as an option. You don't have to follow. So if you've come in and you've got a mentor that's saying you should be working like 70+ hour weeks and teaching is a hard job and you should be working that way, but it's burning you out, that's not the right mentor for you. And you might want to look at unions, and you might want to look at other networks and say, well, is there an opportunity where I can see something that would work for me? So there is a light and shadow to networking. It's a very positive, but you need to approach it with curiosity and look at it as, what could I learn and how could I grow if I choose to, rather than, well, everyone's better than me and I might as well give up teaching because everyone looks like they're so much, like they find it easy and they don't do this or don't do that. If we go with a fixed mindset, then we will continue to shame ourselves. But if we go with an open curiosity mindset into networking, like Rashida said, there are, you know, it's who you know, right? I wouldn't have been here today if I hadn't bumped into you on Instagram, or I met Naya at a conference. So it's about knowing people to then see what else is out there and what opportunities are out there.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I think that's really useful. We're coming to the end of our Q&A panel now, and the end of our fantastic event this morning and this afternoon. So what I'd like to do now is ask you both, what would be your one top tip for somebody new or just starting out in education? One thing that you might have learned or seen that you would want to pass on to others. So I'm going to come to Rashida first, and then we'll go to Annabelle.
That's quite a tough question, that is. And Annabelle, I love the light and shadow quote. I'm going to make sure I use that in future discussions. I think the one thing that I've learned is that there are people out there that want to help you, want to support you, and you need to be open to that. Yeah, and it's just finding your group, your tribe. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You find your tribe and you support your tribe, and the tribe supports you. And I think that's probably the one tip that I would give. Go out there, find your tribe, and and be open with your tribe, support and be supported.
Thank you, Rashida. And Annabelle, what was your top tip?
Put yourself first. I think anyone, when we look back, we go, you know what, if I'd started out with saying no to things, knowing what my values are, knowing what my core values are and how I want to approach my job, how many hours I want to work, when I do want to work, when I don't want to work, how much am I going to give? And when you understand your boundaries at the very beginning, they can tweak and change over time, of course, as you learn and grow. But I think you need to first decide, what do you want? What school do you want to work in? What tribe do you want to have around you? What things do you want? And then you can make an agreement with the world around you as to how you want to grow with that. So I think initially, put yourself first is the top tip. And if that feels uncomfortable for you, which it does for many, teaching is a giving profession, educating in general, wherever you are, is a giving profession. Learning how to receive can feel challenging, but it is possible. But you just have to set your boundaries first.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you to both of you for giving up some of your time this Saturday for free and sharing your thoughts and experiences, and for your amazing talks and for the questions. So thank you so much. It's been great having you here. Thank you, and go and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thank you, Ben. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, we've come to the end of our fantastic event this morning now, and this afternoon rather. I know some of you might be watching this back, so I'm just going to briefly go through just the last couple of things about our network, because we're not a new network, but we have been going for a while, but we have been a bit dormant recently because we've not had as many volunteers as what we need to help us run our events and run our network. So In terms of next steps, if you're able to and you've attended, please complete the survey, share your thoughts on social media, and if you've got any questions, then come back and email us or DM us. But also, if you want to be involved as a network leader, we'd love to have you on our network committee. You don't have to give up every weekend or regular time. It just got to be help here and there. It could be that you just help tweet during our events. You might want to organise events. You might want to write our newsletter. Any of those things are okay to do. But we'd like to thank you for attending the event, booking a ticket, and we will be in contact with our next event, which we probably expect will be in around the summertime, whether it's in the form of a bit more of an online conference like this or more of an informal networking event online. But thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.